Thank you, Mayor and Council. Thanks for taking the time to join us today. We're here to talk about broadband. I know that we've had a couple other discussions about this. So we've got a PowerPoint presentation that was included in the packet. We're going to walk through that. I think at any point that we're moving through here and we want to stop and have a further discussion, we've got plenty of time to talk today. So please interrupt us, flag us down, anything. You will hopefully remember Keith Myers from Ditesco. He is our consultant, so he's working directly for the town, or Ditesco is working directly from the town on this project. They're kind of our advisor here. They have much more experience in this realm than we do. Similar to my role in the police building, like we're going to lean heavily on the experts and then try to make the experts' information and the town's desires come together. With that, I think I will send it over to Keith. He's got the presentation. If you give me just 1 second, I will get it on Zoom and on your guys' screens there.
Mayor, council members, Keith Meyer again with Ditesco. Thanks for having me for the presentation this evening. Great. So we'll walk through the outline of this presentation first. We'll talk a little bit about the summary of the internet service provider selection process that the town went through, some recent stakeholder outreach results, a prioritization and plan of projects that the town could consider, a business model approach to broadband for the community, and a few next steps. So quick summary of the process that we went through to select an internet service provider. So the focus of Timnath's broadband plan was to focus on ISP selection, specifically with a focus on a municipal partnership. So looking at both Fort Collins and Loveland as potential municipal partners for providing broadband services to the town of Timnath. So an LOI process was instituted in November of 2022, and both Connection and Pulse received that LOI. They provided their responses in January of 23, and from that, staff evaluated both LOI submittals through 7 criteria, and really focusing on the beneficial business model, return on investment components of that, as well as customer service, community engagement, and other components that I'll talk about here in just a moment. Staff had a unanimous choice and recommendation here this evening to pursue the relationship with Pulse. So a little bit about the evaluation criteria. The things that were scored and ranked and evaluated relative to the ISP submittals were the list in your packet, but do they offer future-proofing technology? Is the ISP providing sustainable revenue source to the town, or will they as part of their business model? Does the ISP provide a good customer service and have a good net promoter score relative to industry? Is the ISP operationally sound? Are they clearly delineating their dedication to serving Timnath, including things like co-branding initiatives and things of that nature to make sure that the community understands that this is a Timnath-sponsored program? Does the ISP have a working relationship of grant funding programs and how they might translate to helping the town of Timnath offset costs for this particular program? And then do they offer more than just internet? Do they offer TV packages, phone, things that are industry standard relative to those packages that folks would enjoy?
So I just wanted to chime in a little bit about what we saw in the differences in those proposals. First, I would say that they were both very good proposals. I think that we are in a unique position, I think, where we have the option of 2 municipal providers basically at our adjacent to our town boundary. So that's something that we should be we should consider ourselves very lucky to have that. So both proposals, I think, would have served the town very well. I don't have any reservations about going with one direction or the other. I think the reason that we chose Pulse, or the reason that Pulse scored higher. And I would say that of these 7 criteria, there was really about 3 of them that differentiated the 2. The other 4 were, equal on the scoring. Really, I think Pulse had a better presentation of what the business plan would look like, so we could understand kind of what those deal points would look like as we potentially enter into the negotiations of a intergovernmental agreement with them. They do have a award-winning customer service department, and they talked a lot about that and then how they would roll messaging out to the town. So from the person who will get the calls when that doesn't go right, it really impressed me about, how they talked about through design, through implementation, through construction, like how the messaging works and how that they talk to the future subscribers, and kind of, 2 things, right? They keep people informed about what's going on in their neighborhood and what's going on in the project in general, but then also they give people, they set the expectation of like, okay, this is not going to happen for me right now, or this is going to happen for me right now, or, we're, where we live right now, we're in like the next 4 months kind of window. So, that information I thought was really good to see in the proposal, and kind of, it just seemed like it was a much more complete package and how that rollout would work. I think so. The people who scored that are myself, Dawn, Aaron, and Corey, our other engineer, who's kind of sitting on those. We all scored them together, and I think we all, while we all had different numbers in our scoring, the kind of the overall theme of all of our scoring was consistent. Any questions about that? Or
I just have a random question. You mentioned award-winning customer service department. Who gives out these awards?
So they are nationally ranked for their customer service, and there's a metric, and I cannot remember what the name of the metric is, but the average, net promoter score. This is why we have Keith. The average of ISPs across the country is like 4, and they were, somewhere in the 68. So quite a bit above the national average. Does that answer your question?
I think so. So this isn't like a Yelp thing. This is
no.
This is some kind of nationally tracked metric that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. We did not do an informal poll for that.
Okay.
Real quick here is, as I understand it, the proposed technology utilized by both Pulse and Connection is essentially the same equipment, but Pulse does have a different approach to the conduiting. And can you talk a little bit about that and
Sure.
why that might be beneficial or not?
Sure. I can answer those questions. So yeah, both networks are a GPON network, and 2 differences primarily. Connection is a fully spliced network, and Pulse uses a connectorized system that's easier actually from a service drop and maintenance standpoint. But they also Pulse uses what's called a future path conduit. And so it's really a conduit inside a conduit. So there's called a 4-way, which is 4 conduit paths, or a 7-way conduit path. So they use that as a standard in their network design, the future path conduit that allows future capacity in what is essentially a 2 or 2.5 inch conduit diameter that allows future deployment of fiber more easily.
Okay, and then in terms of like the routers and all that, it's essentially the same technology. What are the advantages and disadvantages of the splice approach at the point of service versus the connective one?
Yeah, the connectorized network is the arguments against that is that there is a failure point there and maybe a signal loss as far as a level of service standpoint goes. But a fully spliced network is maybe more robust because it's fully spliced and it doesn't require that potentially failure point, or doesn't have that failure point in the future. The fully spliced network requires a bit more I'll say sophistication of technicians up front, because you're splicing every point, whereas you're in Pulse's network, they're just connecting essentially a plug and play sort of system. The jury's a little bit out as far as how long that connectorized system operates, but it's so far the technology's proven to operate, well into the similar life of a fiber. So, up to 20 years.
Okay, is that connectorized technology relatively new, or have we seen that deployed in places where we've seen it last, 20 or 30 years or whatever?
My understanding, they use a CommScope product, and it's been deployed for my understanding at least 10 years in various communities across the country. So a little bit about the stakeholder outreach results. So the town sponsored a survey online, which asked residents, who is your service provider? Where do you live? General locations across the community. What service levels are you paying for? And what do you think about that? Or do you know about that? Current subscription costs, and what do you use internet for? A lot of people use internet service for lots of different things: entertainment, telehealth, education, maybe work from home components. So the survey contained things of that nature. We'll go through those results here shortly. And then we asked, the survey asked the community, would you be willing to pay $80 a month for, sorry if this is bad, it's too loud. Would you be willing to pay $80 a month for a gigabit symmetrical service? And then the last one, would you be willing to have essentially a cost adder to your bill to accelerate bringing high-speed broadband symmetrical type service to the town of Timnath? So those were the questions that were asked. So diving into the results here a little bit, the first one, this first slide just shows the distribution of participants in the survey across the community, which the highest there is shown as 99 participants in the survey were from the Timnath Ranch subdivision, down to the fewest being 5 there, or 4 at Kitchell Lake. So you can see the distribution of the participants. There was 262 participants in the survey. So it was, from a percentage standpoint of total residents in the community, fairly well participated in the survey. Folks did. The stakeholder outreach results then relative to how do they use the internet. General internet browsing and use, the number of folks that said they do that is, above close to 250. Gaming, streaming and movies and TV, both work from home, education, and lastly, telehealth services for healthcare. So pretty good cross-section of use across the community relative to the different types of use that folks might have for internet. I'll stop there. Any questions about the survey results thus far? No. Okay. Then the next couple of questions, would folks be willing to pay $80 a month for a gigabit symmetrical service to their home? Similar to your results on the Senate Bill 152 and the ability for the residents to desire to have higher speed internet, about 80% said yes, and we're willing to pay $80 a month for that. 21% or 54 folks said no. The other question is willingness to pay to accelerate service. So this is a unique question to bring it faster to town. About half, so there's 3 tiers of the question. The first tier being $5 a month, $10 a month being the second tier, and $20 a month being the third tier. So about 18% said, yeah, I'm willing to pay $20 a month. 12% said, I'm willing to pay $10 a month. And 21% said, I'm willing to pay $5. And the other, about 50% said, no, I'm not willing to pay any more to accelerate the service. Question?
And did we take out the people that said they weren't willing to pay for the service at all from this graph, or does this include them as well in the no section?
I would assume that they would be included in the 21% that said they wouldn't be willing to pay the $80 are part of that 49%.
Okay.
Yeah, it's same total number of votes.
Okay. Just to get a feel for of those who are willing to pay.
Right.
It looks like the vast majority is willing to pay a little extra, which is an answer that surprises me a little bit, but it's interesting. So, okay, just want to check to see if that had been adjusted or not.
In any of the business models, did they mention, like, I see $80 here. Was there any mention of like financial assistance to residents? They can't maybe afford $80. Was that included in those packages?
It was not included in the survey.
No, like in the business plan for these.
No, it's not included in the business plan either.
Thank you.
So the way that works from Pulse Connection, those folks, they participate in the ACP program, which is a federally subsidized program that subsidizes that monthly rate down to $35 a month. And that's part of the services that they offer.
Thank you.
Yep.
So in that, just so I'm clear, Keith, in that model, then Pulse would get a stipend from the government to make up the delta there. It wouldn't be like Pulse is providing the service at a discount.
Correct. Yeah, so from a business model standpoint, it doesn't really affect the
I understand. Thank you.
operation of the model.
Just personally, I was pretty surprised that 51% were willing to sign up for the escalator. It was surprising to me.
51% or what?
51% were willing to sign up for an additional cost to accelerate the program.
Got it.
So this next slide talks a little bit about just who the service providers are currently serving the community and what are their reported speeds. So on the left in the pie chart, the majority of the town is served by Comcast or Xfinity. CenturyLink has a small percentage there at 15%, and other was a host of other potential providers like TDS and others, maybe even satellite. There was a host of different folks in that last 4% of the pie chart. And then from a service speed standpoint, the greater than a gigabit, or we've listed it here, 1,000 megabits per second. There was about 12% that said they received that service, but none of them symmetrical. So this is just in the way in which the question was asked and the way it was reported. This is 1,000 megabits download, not upload. And then the next one is between 500 and 1,000, about 23%, and between 200 and 500, about 19%. So some folks were not sure, or reported lower speeds than that. Then the cost associated with each one of those levels, less than $50. So about 22 folks in the community report about 8% that they're paying less than $50, all the way up to greater than $150 being about 5% of the total for that internet service package that they chose from their provider. So the grand majority of the folks in Timnath, between the $50 and $80 range and the $80 and $100 range is what folks are currently paying for internet service. And I'll stop there. Any questions about that slide?
Any questions about the survey in general? I think we had it open for 2 weekends, about 11 days. And I think this is a pretty good result. I mean, this is about what we see on most of our park surveys. Not as good as when we, do the town-wide survey. Those are open for much longer and have a much larger presence as far as like our pushing, messaging out to the citizens. But, this is about what we're usually seeing on these type of results.
I wonder if maybe there's a little bit of self-selection in that people that are interested in the internet are more willing or more apt to participate in an internet survey. I just throw that out there, but I agree that the results seem to suggest strong support.
I guess one thing I would add to that, I mean, you had about an 80-20 split, which is very close to what we had with the townwide survey with 1,000 people responding. And when we had the ballot question with a year ago now, it was about 80-20. I guess one observation I'll make is when we look at the neighborhood breakdown, it was pretty heavily Timnath Ranch. What I would suspect there are a lot of people in those other subdivisions within Timnath Ranch, such as Somerville Estates, West Village, Timnath South. I think a lot of us in that section tend to identify ourselves as Timnath Ranch residents. That's what I hear a lot. So I do think it's probably a little more even than that graph shows, but
Yeah, I agree. I think that, those smaller areas in there are less identifiable as from the larger areas,
Yeah.
Timnath Ranch, yeah.
I mean, I only know I'm in Timnath South because of my time here. Otherwise, I would have answered Timnath Ranch on this question. But so yeah, that's what I suspect is the case on that.
Yeah, I think they would all fall though in that general geographic area of south of Harmony and kind of in that area. Yep. The other thing I wanted to share about the survey results is we did have a place where if you were specifically interested and wanted us to contact you about more information with the program as it becomes available, we got a bunch of people, like probably about half of the people, I think, signed up for that. So I think, we purposefully have an anonymous ability to respond to these surveys because we want people to respond honestly and not think that we're, saying, oh, the people who live over here are voting these ways and stuff like that. But this was people volunteering with their address and email to say, I want more information about this. I'm interested in the programs. I want to know what's going on with it. So that was encouraging.
Okay, well, a little bit about a prioritization. So the map, I'm sure on your screen is a little bit easier for you to read here, but the interesting thing about the way the networks work, and Brian said this earlier, the town of Timnath being in a bit of a sweet spot to take advantage of some neighboring communities' work in the broadband space. Connections network is across I-25 at Prospect and at Mulberry at State Highway 14. Pulse's network is very soon to be at County Road 32E, just north of Ptarmigan. They're serving the Ptarmigan area very shortly in partnership with Larimer County. That brings both of those municipal networks in very close proximity to the town of Timnath. And so this particular map shows two distinct feeder routes coming from the south, one in green and one in blue. One up County Road 5 and then one up essentially over to County Road 3 and then up an easement to serve from the south. So these particular feeder routes are what develops into the core ring of the network, if you will, that then can connect and be redundant. Our ultimate recommendation, should this go forward, is to connect actually to the connection network as what we call in the industry a backhaul or a separate feeder to allow a redundant feed. Should a line get cut, you can actually provide service from both different directions. And so I think that can be arranged relatively easily. And that's what the pink route shows as a future feeder connection. The sites are shown in colors. So those are different areas of town that can be served off of these feeder networks down into a distribution level. The red being Town Center and Summerfield and Timnath Ranch, and the blue being Timnath Ranch East is what we're calling it, and then North Yellow and Harmony, and then Old Town in pink. Those would be the first areas that would be targeted from a service standpoint. But the ones currently targeted and the ones that were analyzed in the business model after the receipt of the LOI response from Pulse are the ones shown in red. So the red and blue alternative are the primary ones. And the reason those were picked is it's the highest and densest area of town, highest number of people. And so in the industry, we call that premises passed. How many premises can you pass? And that reduces your overall capital cost and increases your take rate. So people that would be willing to sign up for the service. The red area being about 6.3 million in construction costs and about another 500,000-600,000 to build that feeder out coming from the south. So currently, the town has budgeted funds for this particular project, and they could continue into 2023 and then serving out area 1 in late 2023, rest of 2024. So that's currently how the overall prioritized plan is coming together, and certainly welcome feedback and input this evening on how that translates. I don't know, Brian, if you have anything to add to the prioritized plan.
Not necessarily to the prioritized plan, but just kind of, what's included in those numbers, right? So we've separated out the feeder network, which is kind of like your backbone infrastructure is how I would call that as one cost. And then then the numbers associated with each shape build out the local network is kind of how that would look. So in that number, the $6.3 million for the red area, if we're using that as an example. So what that accounts for is all of the service to each individual. Actually, I should say this way. It would pass every house that is depicted with a dot in those on that map. So that puts the service in the front yard of everybody's house, and half of those houses, what we would expect is a 50% take rate. That cost also includes the fiber to the premise for there. So actually like connecting that house to the network. So that $6.3 million basically can serve half of those people. If we were to exceed that 50% take rate, it's about $800 per house to connect from the house to basically your front yard to the house. And frankly, that's a good problem to have. That means that more people are signing up for the service. And so we will have to, kind of evaluate kind of what that would look like. If we do end up, so say we have a 80% take rate, there's an additional couple hundred units there that we would need to kind of assign those funds for. And that's one thing that we'll be discussing with Pulse as we talk about the IGA is so if we cover the first 50% there, like how do we deal with what happens after that? And I think that goes back to how those things affect the financial model. Kind of it's a negotiating point for us, I think.
Any questions about this? Great. So digging into the numbers a little bit more, the proposal coming back from Pulse included an income sharing model, so profit sharing model. So we took a second look at that and applied it to the area we just talked about, the red area, area 1, with 6.3 million in capital cost. That income shared to the town is 25% of Pulse's gross income on internet service only, not on cable TV service or phone, but just on internet service only. That annualized return on investment to the town off that $6.3 million is about 2 to 6%. It ramps up over time as the take rate increases and as some service rate increases are estimated in the model. So subscription rate increase eventually. I think that's currently modeled after like 7 or 8 years. So the payback to the town for full CapEx recovery or capital cost recovery is about 26 years. And certainly that's less than the life of the asset, with the fiber being in the 25-year range typically is how it's depreciated in the marketplace. But there's fiber cable that's been in the ground or underwater since the 80s. So the life of fiber is certainly longer than that if it's taken care of. So that's how the business model is predominantly working. As Brian mentioned, there's lots of metrics in the business model that can be changed as negotiating points in how it all works.
So these numbers do not include any of the capital escalators that we asked about in the survey. So this is in the 49% that said no, that's how these numbers are arrived. If we include those numbers, obviously it accelerates our payback. But the numbers we wanted to present more in a conservative fashion.
Yeah, and what Brian's referring to, if you recall, is just that $5, $10, $20, those adders that would be added to accelerate service can change the way this model works.
Big picture questions about the model or?
So then a little bit about the funding puzzle. There's a lot of things happening in the broadband space nationwide and certainly across the state. Today, actually yesterday, the broadband office issued their capital project fund guidance on $170 million worth of grants that are coming to the state that they'll be administering. So when you look at the overall funding puzzle, is what we're calling it here, which quite frankly, it is a puzzle. It's pretty unique. There's a lot of these pots of money that wouldn't really apply to Timnath, but some of them do. and we can talk about that a little bit more, but these are all the players, the major players from a funding standpoint in the nationwide and local scene. So the NTIA, the Telecommunications Administration, the ISP private sector. So certainly ISPs and, can bring money to the table for capital expansion. BEAD, the program coming from the IIJ funds in BEAD is primarily meant for last mile or service to premises to get customers connected. That program won't roll out until 2024 currently. We have town capital funds on the puzzle. The USDA through their Reconnect program largely serves rural communities, but it's out there and certainly serving folks. The FCC's funds, DOLA, there's grant applications being made right now, as a matter of fact, that we're involved in with DOLA for providing middle mile service to some rural communities, one for Wellington, and then potentially another one to West Loveland area. And the CPF fund, the Capital Projects Fund that I mentioned, that's a middle mile, last mile program that Larimer County has been identified as a tier 1 county for use of those funds. So it's a good program. Certainly Larimer County's been a partner. Mark Faffinger, their CIO, was here and presented at a work session a number of months back when the overall broadband plan for Timnath was presented. He's a big advocate, and certainly they've been a willing partner with Timnath to also provide funding.
So on that, our estimated cost investment over the next decade is roughly 12 million, right?
So we currently in the 5-year CIP, we're showing 15 million over the 5 years.
Okay.
When we did the larger broadband study, it was anticipated that the overall cost for the town was around 30 million. Now, there were inherently a whole bunch of conservative pieces in that. We were planning that number represents everything installed after premises were occupied, after roads are built. We're boring everything. Everything's kind of coming in retrofit. As we hit any new subdivisions, there's substantial savings in those that brings that 30 million down. Do we have, so if we go back to,
The other part of that, like Brian mentioned, is that particular master plan, if you will, of broadband service to the town was looking at the entire GMA, and it was looking at development areas and future growth of the community that hadn't been, certainly built out yet. And it was assuming that it was going to build to all of those places. So like Brian mentioned, it was a pretty conservative plan, just to understand what it would take.
So let's say worst case scenario is 30 million. What's a conservative versus an optimistic outside funding projection from these various grants? Is thoughts on what we could hope for?
That's a tough question. I appreciate the question. It's probably one where it's going to come in pieces. So for example, and maybe Brian can point to it on the map, but there's certain little, if we'll call them enclaves, I don't know if they're exactly enclaves, but the county has certain residential subdivisions inside the town of Timnath still that they would like to serve with broadband. They've already stated, and the commissioners have been funding projects like this, that they will bring money to the table to help serve those communities. Ultimately, those communities are going to be Timnath residents as they get annexed. But the initial goal would be to get those connected through Larimer County dollars, if you will, in partnership with Timnath. The other funding sources from a grant standpoint, there is enough data in the greater Timnath area from a service speed standpoint that would likely make areas of Timnath available for BEAD funding, the final last mile funding from the state. How much the town could get, that's a really hard question for me to ask or for me to answer. The standard of broadband is changing. So when we talk about speeds, and we listed those in the survey, the state's moving the minimum level of what they deem to be acceptable service to 100 symmetrical. The key there being in that upload speed. I mean, right now, the technology in the marketplace, even specifically things like DSL and coax, certainly they can't support that upload speed. And so it affects things like telehealth and video conferencing. And so that new standard is going to set a new standard for technology in the marketplace. And that's what's going to be deemed grant eligible. So a lot of areas that appear as though they're currently served, they're going to look at them a little bit differently from that standard. And that'll, I think, allow, especially some of the areas in the periphery of Timnath that are currently in your municipal boundary, those are going to be, in my opinion, going to be made grant eligible.
Could I segue into Robert's question? So you said 30 million for the total cost. Does that include doing Wild Wing, Saratoga Falls, and Fisher?
So the 30 million that we did in the initial study included Fisher, Wild Wing, Saratoga, Timnath Landings, Harmony.
Yeah, of
Timnath
course,
Land-
all the bottom ones.
all
I
the
get
bottom, yeah.
that. I'm
Yeah.
asking the front ones, which you don't have colored.
Yeah. So what we have colored here, the subdivisions come
I
out.
got you. You answered my question.
Okay. But I think to Robert's question, I think, what we're depicting on this map does come out a little bit more than 12 million.
Yeah.
You know,
I'm just trying to manage expectations on grant funding. And is it realistic to hope that we can get 50% of it funded, or 10% or 5%? I mean, where should our mindset be? Understanding that it's not a crystal ball, but where should I set my expectations?
Yeah, so all of these grant programs also have a local match that's typically 25%. So I think the expectation should be, if I were to give you a number, which I'm very nervous doing, in the 10% range. So if you can get grant funding for 3 to maybe 5 million of that 30 million, I think you'd be in great shape. I think you'd be doing well.
With that 30 million, my understanding was I was assuming a 100% take rate when we're being super conservative, when it does not.
Yeah.
I'm seeing a no behind you there, Brian. What was the take rate assumed with that 30 million?
Yeah, the take rate in that master plan was similar to what you're seeing in the business model here,
Okay.
where we're modeling up to a typical industry standard of about 35% take rate.
Okay, so the 6.3 million for area one, we're assuming about a third.
Yep.
Of the residents for that cost.
Yeah, well, 100% of the network is built,
Right.
and up to 50% people are served with drops to their home in that 6.3 million. So that particular red area, we think a 50% take rate.
50% take rate in
Yeah.
area one is what we're assuming there. Okay. Okay, because that will change the 6.3 million number depending on how many people initially sign up.
Yes.
correct.
Okay. And if I'm understanding all this correctly, we're thinking area 1, 23, 24, and probably area 2, 3, 4 in the next year or two after that. Is that more or less? And maybe Aaron or Lisa or somebody needs to chime in on that, but is that what we're thinking? So in 25, 26, we'd have these 4 areas done?
Right. So the capital improvement plan, actually, I'm gonna just jump out of the PowerPoint for a second. And
One thing I might add to your question, when you talk about the $6.3 million, there's $800 per premise approximately in there for that 50% take rate. I won't put words in Pulse's mouth, but they typically don't charge for that service drop to the home.
Okay.
If the customer has a period of service. So if they stay with the utility for 6 months, they waive the service installation fee. So there's not, when you forecast that service drop cost into the future, say there was greater than 50% take rate, that cost might not be a real cost to either Timnath or to the customer.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
so the current funding in the capital improvement plan is in 23, we have 2 million, and 24, we have 5 million.
Mhm.
So that together would be a $7 million project. Then we have 3 million in 25, 3 million in 26, and 2 million in 27. So if we're looking at the
Okay.
map,
That essentially builds out what you've got here on the map. The larger feeder lines and the 4 areas is what you're telling me.
yeah, I think that when I just added them up, I think that's a little like around 12.5 million.
Okay.
So we would be able to go a little further than that.
Okay. So Wild Wing, Saratoga, Fisher, they'd be, as we've currently drafted the capital improvement plan to 27, they'd be after that.
They'd be 27 or after, yeah.
Okay. And my understanding is, if the town were to have, it's not a question of construction capacity, it's just a matter of how much money we'd be putting forward on this. So not pushing anything today or anything like that, but if the town were to get a bond, we could build out the whole network in 2 years, including Saratoga Wild Wing, just so I can understand what does an accelerator mean? What's our top end? What's our low end?
Sure. Yeah.
Things like that.
Yeah. I mean, I think I'll caveat this by saying that the construction industry is challenged right now. However, there's a lot of people around doing this type of work.
Okay.
So with that caveat, I would lean on Keith.
Yeah, I think if you had the cash available today, you
Mhm.
could build out the entire network within 2.5 years.
Okay. Just so I understand what our top level of delivery would be. Okay. Thank you.
I have more questions about the business plan.
Sure.
When we anticipate the business plan of that 2 to 6%, does that include costs that's going to go back to Pulse for their staff? Is that all included in this estimate of our annualized return?
It is. Their operational costs are removed from that equation. So their gross income less their operational expenses, less a reserve set aside so that there's a reserve component of the model, then a net that's shared back to the town.
Thank you.
Yep.
And Lisa, correct me if I'm wrong, but right now we're earning about 4.75 in the bank. Is that correct? Thank you.
I have an additional question about that return. So the amount that you had listed was specific to internet. If our residents choose to go with their phone or TV, is there any additional share back to the town based on that?
No, that was removed from Pulse's proposal to the town because they essentially don't make any money. There's no a lot of return on those services to them. So there's really nothing to share back.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
The place where there are additional revenue streams is that once the infrastructure is in place, there would be potentially, especially if we use the multipath conduit, there would be people who would be other entities that would be interested in either utilizing the conduit or utilizing the fiber backbone network. So an example of that would be if a 5G provider wanted to come in, they would be able to utilize that infrastructure that we had in the ground, and we would want to include some of that share back within the IGA with Pulse. We don't have a lot of numbers about what that would look like, and there's a ton of different scenarios where that could come into play, but there are other ways to generate revenue out of this investment.
Has there been any desire, like if you heard from businesses around town that beyond residents that are looking for this kind of speed, or?
At this point, we have not specifically reached out to the businesses. Nothing that I saw in the survey results indicated that people were, taking the poll on behalf of their business. But I think that, as we get closer to what a real target date might be for some of these things, I think we would start rolling that out. I think the business packages are different. There are different revenue tier and a different kind of marketing push, I think.
Okay, thank you.
So going off a question Brent asked, that essentially if we found the money and wanted to accelerate this, we could have everything built out in say 3 or 5 years. What is the likelihood that some other entity, private entities, could come in and do a similar build out, provide the same thing for the whole town in that time period? If we don't do that, is that anything in the marketplace that would be a possibility?
It's a good question. I guess I would look backward to look forward and, I guess I don't want to use Mark's words from the county, but he says, the private industry's had many years to bring this type of service to communities and they haven't. And so there's not a industry movement, if you will, that would be indicative of the private incumbent ISPs building out large scale fiber to the home networks currently. There's certainly some around the nation in very dense, downtown Denver, for example. But in residential subdivisions, it's unusual.
I was just thinking, if we have 75% of our community presumably that wants this, and at least 50% of those people want it sooner rather than later. I'm just looking at, can we deliver this any other way than the town, taking on this project?
There are other models, right? The PPP model, right? Public-private partnership. None of those that I've seen offer any kind of share back. It's basically like we're putting in our money to accelerate the service for our citizens, but there's nothing coming back to the town. Windsor recently tried to go through that process after a year and a half of, they went through an RFP process. They selected a provider that they wanted to partner with. And after, roughly a year and a half into that process, they abandoned that deal because the things that were critical to them as far as service and timelines, when it came to the actual agreement, the ISP was unwilling to meet those. So I really has a different model where they basically just granted a license. So they were incentivizing by waiving fees to a company. And I don't know exactly how that's going. But they're pretty much saying like, we're gonna waive a bunch of fees and you guys can come in and provide this. But I think you lose a lot of ability to influence where they go first. They're going to go where the cheapest install cost is and the highest take rate is, and they're going to prioritize those areas based on their business model. In this aspect, we have more influence in how that gets rolled out and what the parameters are for our citizens.
So that more likely serve new builds, new residents, not existing communities. Is that right?
Yeah, and multifamily dwellings where you're passing one premise, but you're getting 8 subscriptions, or areas, where you're cutting a deal for service with an HOA ahead of the build. So you're in there and you have a guaranteed take rate of 100%. I think prioritizing those areas, guide where they're willing to invest their infrastructure.
What's the worst case scenario? We start down this path and things go bad. What does that look like?
Well, I guess I would answer that question by saying, you're partnering with another municipality, an adjacent municipality. Your interests are protected through an intergovernmental agreement. I don't know. I think from the proposal that was received, there's a high degree of interest in partnering with the town to make it successful. I don't see Pulse as a utility, failing per se. So, if there was a failure mechanism for that ISP to not be in existence anymore, it would be, that risk is very, very small. And so, it's hard for me to imagine. I appreciate the question, but it's hard for me to imagine what could go wrong that would cause that to occur. Certainly there could be decisions made that maybe slow the deployment of fiber to the home in Timnath or change priorities based upon the map. But I don't see there a failure in the relationship or a failure in the business mechanism. The business model is already being implemented between Larimer County and Pulse and Larimer County in connection to serve other areas of Larimer County. So I think it's going to be, proven out here very quickly.
I think maybe the challenges probably, I think, might come on our side, so if we, say we start working on a $7 million project and something happens and then we decide that we can't finish that commitment. I think that, that leaves us with infrastructure in the ground, but maybe not, getting houses served. So we're not generating any revenue based on that infrastructure. The numbers that we used in the cost estimates for this work are based on a bid process that Loveland went through that is an open bid process. So we can utilize their fixed costs for installation materials, things like that. So I don't, and there's contingencies built into these numbers as well. So I'm not afraid. I shouldn't say that I'm not afraid. It seems like we have enough protection there that we're not going to see fiber is going to go through the roof. And now, the $7 million project becomes a $12 million project, or, the availability of the materials is going to be suspect.
The communities, Fort Collins, Loveland, and Larimer County partnered on a regional bid. And that was an open governmental bidding process that any community in the county could, in the region, I suspect, could tap into that contract. And those contractors were awarded that contract and have certainly held their prices in that model thus far. And so I think, and that's everything that is the basis of cost for you is based on those contracts. So at least they're recent solid numbers from the marketplace.
Yeah, so I'm hearing, one risk is our partner fails us, but you view that as a low risk. And another risk is that we invest in the infrastructure and then we don't get the take rate that the model requires, or for whatever reason, we're not able to deliver. Is that kind of a good summation?
It is.
Okay. As far as, take rate, do we have a sense of what Pulse is getting in Loveland?
My understanding, both Pulse and Connection are in the high 20% range of take rate, low 30% range.
And we think we're likely to do a little bit better than that.
We've based the model on 50% because of the survey results and the strong desire of the community, quite frankly.
The other thing I would add to that is I think that in Fort Collins and Loveland, there are other alternatives, that you could pay more and get a similar speed. You might have already had gigabit symmetrical service in Fort Collins or Loveland, but paying much more. Or maybe you have something that's, mid-tier in that level, but you're happy with that package and you don't want to change. I think that there's less options for the Timnath residents than there are in Fort Collins and Loveland. And I think, that would be one factor I think that would contribute to a higher take rate.
It may be the fact that we're experiencing growth. We have maybe people that are less entrenched with current providers. And is that fair to say that, when you're not facing a switching cost for some folks?
It's possible. Sure.
Okay. Appreciate that.
Another point that Nathan just whispered into me is that Fort Collins and Loveland are still like right at the final stages of completing their bids. And, they expect that take rate to continue to increase. We, in the model that we looked at, it was 10% the first year, 15% the second year, 25%, 35, 50, so we didn't get to the 50% take rate until the sixth year. And so all of that is graduated kind of as far as, but we're accounting for all the cost up in the first 2 years.
There seems to be a lot of questions on the dollar amount and stuff. Could you shoot up? I know you've got an Excel spreadsheet showing up the costs and what you expect over the next years. And I know it's a projection only. Could you flip that up?
I don't actually have. I would rather not actually share that model. I think there's some things in that model that are operational costs and things that think would be appropriate in the public forum.
Like what?
What do you think?
So there's, I think we could do that with permission of Pulse, but there's operational costs that are built into that model, Mayor, that are, competitive in nature. They operate in a competitive marketplace.
Sure.
And so they're competing against Comcast and CenturyLink.
The
and others.
Excel spreadsheet I saw was pretty general. I can't imagine anybody getting a competitive advantage from looking at that Excel spreadsheet. But
If you give me like 4 minutes to like
sure.
doctor it up and make it a little bit more presentable, then I'm happy to do that.
Sure.
Unfortunately, you're gonna have to look at well, here, I can put the logo back on. Do you have any other questions for Keith while I'm doing some work on the phone?
Sorry, maybe I missed this. When you had the red dots up and I saw some, like I zoomed in, there was like lines going through each neighborhood. Can you explain that to me again, how that would work? Like if you're saying there's a connection to each house. So if anybody in the red area, they would have the opportunity to participate in that. And it's not like I just don't understand the technology portion of that.
Yeah, so the network as it gets built, there's essentially a fiber optic cable and a conduit running down either side of the street that has the ability to serve every single house on the street.
Okay.
And you simply call up for service and they connect to a central point, and usually it's called a flower pot or a vault. And then from that point, does a service drop into the home? And so the lines you probably saw are just the network routing essentially that is a high level design that was helped us inform the cost estimate. Is that answer
Yeah,
your question?
that did absolutely. I just don't understand that part. So thank you.
Well, and when you have the $800 per house, is there like a time limit that owners have to be able to utilize the town or whoever paying that cost? So like, let's say somebody sells their house in 3-4 years, they didn't initially have it brought to their house. Somebody new moves in and wants it. Would that homeowner then be responsible for that 800 or probably at that time more? Or is that something that would be set aside so that future homeowners could participate without paying that? Or is that something that Pulse always typically will kind of cover the cost of if they have service for a certain amount of time?
Yeah, it's a great question. You're putting me on the spot again. And those are questions I can't really answer because that's an operational question that Pulse has. And certainly there's representatives in the audience that could probably answer that question for you better than I can. But I think the predominant answer might be that, they would work with the town on those service drops and those individual customers, depending on what that cost was at that particular time. But I can't answer that question. It depends on how Pulse is operating at that particular time. And quite frankly, what you've negotiated in the IGA with them.
Okay, because I know we talked about having, 15% the first year, 20 or 25. So obviously it's going to take many years. And I just didn't know if that $800 would be a barrier where, homeowners aren't going to want to participate because it's no longer free to them.
Sure. It's a good question.
Trying to do this without breaking the model.
Yeah, I know. I just stuck. It's nothing like having people look over your shoulder as you're trying to do something. So I appreciate that, Brian.
So there's a couple of things. It's down here.
Brian loves the pressure. Good. I think I gave him some.
That's okay. I'm up to the challenge. We're good.
Yeah.
I think
She knows I don't dance.
I think that spreadsheet was very declarative of that the money's in and out and that not in, but the money's out and how they're allocated and when they're going to be spent. And it was very, I saw it obviously, and I thought it was very informative.
Well, and I would hope that as a service to the community, there wouldn't be a whole lot of costs that aren't known if it's run by the town. So I agree.
So a couple caveats, right? So we have not started negotiating the IGA with Pulse, right? What we have is the information that they provided to us in their proposal. We have talked to them and we're anxious to get to that next step, but I think we wanted to have this check-in before we started that.
Thanks.
Um,
Thanks, Brent. And I think we all up here fully understand it's Keith and your best guess of what you think we're going to be. And we're not going to sit there and put you on a cross if it's not to the penny exactly what's on the sheet.
Okay, so let's take this off, Keith.
No, that's
Cursor. I'm gonna have to look at it up here and then drive backwards. So just
Sure.
Give me a little bit of grace. Actually, let's see if I can make that over.
So just as Brian's bringing this up and making it a little bit larger, just to be clear, this is not the model that Pulse provided in their proposal to you. This is one that we've built based upon Area 1, the red area. So we've made assumptions in this model that we think make good business sense for the town of Timnath, but this is not what they've proposed to you. So I just wanted to make that very, very clear.
Yeah, so everything in here is an assumption on our part. The only real, I think, number that we are using is the 25% share back on the broadband revenue. So I can kind of walk you through this a little bit. Let me zero this one out. So we do have a place in here where we can change that adder. So that was the number that we were talking about in the survey. If we want to look at what that does to it. So, but I guess is a larger picture. As Keith said, this is just for the red area, Area 1. So we've got the capital expense of 6.3 million. See, I can almost see it over there.
Yeah, we want me to explain?
Sure.
Yeah, so just real briefly, there's a capital expense, so CapEx is 6.3 million. The model assumes that there's 1,747 premises in Area 1 that are serviceable. That's the total number of addresses that we counted for that area. So then at year 6, that 50% take rate, 874 of those people are being served by internet in this model. And the monthly subscription service for internet only is $74.95. That's the current rate charged by Pulse for a standard gigabit symmetrical package. You can see the escalation of take rate on the right there. Year 1, 10%, year 2, 15%, all the way up to year 6 at 50%. All of that translates down to the model below with a inflationary cost for OpEx and an inflationary cost for service rate increase or a subscription rate increase. Those don't occur until years 6 and 7. So in column A there, you can see annualized revenue. That's the gross coming from internet service for that amount of take rate per year. After the yellow cell, that's where a subscription adder is added, or an increase in subscription. I think it's at 3% over year by year.
You can see that in this column here. So that's the monthly subscriber cost rate. So you can see it stays static at that $74.95 until you get to that start adding that.
Yep.
2%.
So then the annualized income to Timnath is at 25% of gross. And then there's just the total running income to Timnath. So that's just a summation of the annualized income. And then it calculates your annualized ROI off of every year to year, off of that $6.3 million investment. So that's essentially how the model works. There's certainly some other levers that can be pulled or changed in how it all operates, but in this particular model, your cost recovery is occurring at the start of those green cells. So at year 26.5, essentially, you're recovering your capital costs. And you're almost getting to that 6% return rate at that time.
Do you have, on your presentation, how much more presentation do you have?
We have like a slide about next steps. That's it.
Okay,
So
great.
We have
So
plenty of time to dive into this
here,
if that's what we want.
so I'd like to make a couple of comments. First off, I think Brian and Keith, you did exactly what we directed you to do, which was give us an analysis, tell us look out there, see what alternatives are, analyze some of those alternatives, and you probably took it one step further in coming back with a recommendation on which provider, but that's great. You took it one step further. But I think I think you did a marvelous job on pulling together all the info and stuff and made it so that I think it's understandable and readable. And I appreciate putting up the total accounting for the project on the board here. I got 5 red flags, okay? Red flag 1 is we're going to put in $6.2 million at the start. So could you roll it up to the first? Okay, we're gonna put in $6.2 million. We're going to get 39,000. If we're going to have to borrow the money, we don't got 6.2 million. That's only if you just got done telling me that the grants, without grants, let me go this way. Without any grants, we're going to have to borrow the $6.2 million. Okay, why not?
Well, we have $15 million funded in our accounted for in our 5-year CIP that balances our budget.
But we're using that money that we could have invested or put in more roads or anything else. So the opportunity cost, let's go there if that's easier for you. The opportunity cost of 6.2 million isn't factored in here. If you put the opportunity cost in here, this shows a significant loss every year until I think, let's say you got 4% interest rate. It's going to show a loss all the way to about year 10.
I think that the difference there is that we're providing a requested service to our citizens.
Explain yourself.
Well, 80% of the people in the survey, the townwide survey, requested that the town explore and invest in this service.
Explore, I agree with. I don't know if it said invest, but it said explore. So I think the town needs to fully understand that this is going to cost them significant dollars, no matter what. The second thing is that I don't like the business deal. I've never heard of a business deal. Well, I put in all the money, you get 75% of the revenue, and I only get 25%. To me, it should be the reverse of that. We should get 75% of the revenue. They should get 25%. So the business transaction, the business deal doesn't make sense to me. 26-year payback. I don't know of any business in the world, any enterprise in the world would accept a 26-year payback. I think almost all of them are going, I've never seen one less than 7. I'll even go to 14, but 26 is, to me, too long. And the problem with the 26-year payback is I don't think there's anybody in this room that doesn't believe the technology is going to change significantly in the next 10 or 12 years. I mean, technology is going to change, and we're not going to have the same technology year 26 as we do today. So we run into a problem there with it also. I have a problem also with, we're sort of abandoning Wild Wing and Saratoga Falls. They aren't going to get in for about 5 or 6 years after everybody else does. And so I think that's not a fair way to approach it and stuff. I'm not sure we got a good feel of what the town says. We had 265 people respond to the survey out of 6,200 voters. So we're looking at less than 3% of the people responded and trying to extrapolate that. And that's not a scientific survey, because the only people that sent in answers were those that would be interested in that project. I mean, the great fallacy is that this would be a scientific statistical analysis. It's not. It's far from that. That's okay as long as we recognize that all we did was send out stuff, and whoever wanted to send in a survey would. I didn't send in a survey. I'm sure a lot of people didn't send in. I never send in surveys. I think there's people on your staff that don't ever send in surveys. So I don't think we've got a representative edict from the town on this. When you're saying, okay, 50% take rate, so that the town is going to invest in one way or the other, either lost opportunity cost or whatever, $30 million, which only benefits 50% of the population, because the other 50% is not going to use it, according to your stats, and that makes sense. I mean, it's my understanding is connection is right now at 32 or 34% take rate. So it makes sense it'll go higher, but that's one of my concerns. And so that's those issues. You didn't present it, and I'm going to throw it out. I mean, I'd be much more favorable to a license fee arrangement. There, we don't have a cost. We don't have 6 million that we have to be limited for the first phase. That doesn't count the remaining 25 million that we have to do, and we're doing it on the come. And I would think the town would want us to take more effort than a hope that we get funded with that. And I'm not at all challenging Brian, you or Keith. What I'm saying is your conclusion is totally different than my conclusion. And after 40 years of being in business and working through a lot of projects and a lot of formulas and a lot of returns on investments, this one isn't very good in my mind on where we are. A license fee deal, one of the reasons, the disadvantages was they'll put it where they want to put it, wherever it gets them the most money right away. Well, that's what we're doing. Look at your whole red spot is where the most houses are and the most ability to get to them. You aren't running out to Saratoga Falls and putting it in there. You're putting it into the red. So that's not a fair disadvantage to the licensing agreement. Now, I'm not saying that there isn't issues with a licensing agreement, but I am saying that I'd sure like to see us try to see if we can get a licensing agreement before we proceed on with any significant dollars on this. So I usually don't talk that long on these things. And this time I just have, with my business background, a totally different perspective than I think municipal government has on it. So there we go.
Are we all commenting? Is now a good time?
You can talk or ask questions or
Okay.
whatever. This is a work session. We haven't decided, I don't even know how we're supposed to end up. So,
There's no action coming out of this.
yeah, so
Yeah.
there's no action. So I think this is to provide feedback
Okay.
and ask questions.
So my first question is all of the, because you had mentioned earlier about there are potentials down the road where if a different company comes in, they could kind of piggyback off of what's put in the ground or something like that. So my question was, who owns the actual stuff? The fiber, the materials, who owns that? Would that be the town or would that be Pulse?
I think so. The fiber would be owned by Pulse. There is I think there's a deal point to be negotiated in the IGA if the town would own the conduit or a percentage of that conduit. One thing that we looked at early on is the cost of getting into this, right? So if we own that asset, we would have to maintain that asset.
Okay.
So we don't have another utility in the town, right? So both Fort Collins and Loveland have the broadband is kind of nestled within the electric utility, right? So they already have that infrastructure built in, right? We don't want to have, if we own the conduit or if we own the fiber and somebody doing construction damaged that,
That's on us.
we don't want to have the staff
Okay.
on call to go out and repair that.
Okay.
So it makes the most sense for the provider to own the infrastructure and the network.
Okay. Thank you. I wanted to touch on, I guess, a couple things that you said, Mark. I think one thing that I always go back to is, and I don't have the exact wording, but our residents were asked if they would be willing to put significant, I believe that's the term we use, significant resources for this. So I always kind of come back to that because they said that, and I think that that's how it was worded.
Aaron, do you have that survey question?
And then to touch on the survey pieces, none of the surveys we do are scientific surveys. I mean, the survey that the big town survey that we do is not a scientific survey. So I feel like we should take this the same way we take every other survey we do. I think typically you get people who feel strongly on both ends completing the surveys, whereas the people who are more neutral maybe ignore it a little bit. I know I filled this one out and I'm somewhat neutral on it. So I feel like there are probably some other people who are like that as well. But I know we asked about the money. And I think as far as return on investment, there are a lot of things the town does where we don't get any return on our investment, where we put significant resources into things that not all residents use. I mean, we have beautiful parks. I love our parks. I use our parks. Not everybody uses our parks. And we certainly put significant resources towards that. And so the fact that they've told us that they're willing or wanting to put significant resources towards it, I think for me makes me really want to look at this closely, and certainly there's tweaks, I'm sure. And this is not anything we're making a decision on, but I definitely would like to look at that. I also think if we were to move forward with something, I agree that there are those communities that are not colored right now that I think we would want to look at. And maybe we do look at other ways of, I think Robert asked the question of how long would it take if we put more resources? How long could it potentially take for all of the town? And I think you guys said it could be done within 2 to 3 years. So I think that could be something that we look at to touch on those communities that aren't in there right now, because I agree, like some of those other areas, Saratoga, Wild Wing, I certainly wouldn't want to necessarily leave them out of it. But I just wanted to bring up the fact again that we did ask that question, and how we go about financing that is a completely separate topic. But residents did tell us that they were willing to put significant resources. And obviously that significant means different numbers to different people too, but just wanted to throw that out there.
You able to find the question?
So I don't have a laptop with me, so I don't, and I didn't bring the survey down. What I can tell you is that actually is a statistically valid survey. It had over 900 households respond to it, so it is a
No, it's not.
The one with,
community-wide one that we did.
okay,
It is not. It's not statistically. I'll challenge you on that.
Okay,
Get a mathematician in here and he'll tell you that is not a statistically valid and here's why. It only takes the people that answered. I'm going to use a bad example here, but it's one that hits home. The reason why people projected that Clinton was going to beat Trump in the election was they took survey results from people that sent in their answers. They didn't get the people that didn't send their answers in and yet voted. And that's exactly what our survey is our survey doesn't touch on people that don't answer surveys. I didn't answer that survey. So you can't be statistically valid if all us old white people don't sit there and answer the survey.
I think the one he's talking about is the one that with the community-wide one,
Yeah.
not the one
And I am
that was just
I am
referenced
too.
there.
There were 900 people that got it. If that was randomly chosen, that would be statistically valid. It wasn't randomly chosen. The 900 people were ones who voluntarily sent in their answers and said, here's what we want, which I think I'm not discarding at all that it's reasonable information. I don't, there's no question
Yeah.
it's reasonable information, but it's not statistically valid.
well, I'm not a statistician. The ones we hired would say it is. So I'll just leave it there. This is not my bailiwick. This is not my forte. And so we did use the verbiage significant resources. I don't recall what we used leading up to that. And it ended up at 83% of folks gave us a yes towards that.
In my recollection, and why don't you shoot that to us, was would you like the town to review the possibilities of bringing broadband into the town?
I know it was related to, would you be willing to have the town put significant resources?
He just said he didn't. And I don't think the word significant was ever in it.
I helped wordsmith that question pretty directly, and we did use the word significant town resources.
Okay, I stand corrected.
Sorry, that's okay.
That's okay, I stand corrected.
So, but I do agree with you, Mark, that nobody, including us at the time, knew exactly what significant meant. We don't exactly know what the town thinks of 6.3 million or 30 million. We don't know that. And that's one reason I float the idea of a bond, because then that becomes a vote that's as official as you can get. It's something that's paid for by the revenues of the project. I mean, if you want to talk return on investment, you put a bond for a road or a park, and that's just being paid out of the general fund. And so that's one reason I at least think we ought to consider that, because then it does get Wild Wing and Saratoga in much, much sooner than they otherwise would be. I guess a couple thoughts I'll add is.
And I'll just say, since I was negative on the other, but segueing exactly in the year, I'm fine with a bond where the town votes. I'm 100% behind that.
Okay. And yeah, it would definitely be something the town would need to vote on. With regards to, what kind of private companies would be willing to come in, we did approve some right of way recently for a company that wanted to come in, but they just wanted to do new builds. And I look at the market around us, I see Fort Collins doing this and Loveland doing this and Windsor apparently going this route. And if I were a regional director of Comcast, why in the world would I spend 20, 30 million in Timnath when there's these big city providers right next door that I'm not going to have the market. And maybe our service level is okay now, but how will it look in 10 years if we're lower and lower down the priority list of these private companies? That's part of my concern. And as far as the technology goes, I do have some background in this area, and fiber itself is not going to be obsolete.
You have some experience, really?
I do. I design networking chips that are used to connect computers and wireless signals and things of that nature together. So fiber itself it's not going to be obsolete anytime soon. And in fact, it's the backbone of a 5G network. You got to connect all those antennas up to something. It's a hard connection at some point. And so if we're looking to, for example, improve cell phone signal, this is one of the most direct things the town can do, is helping to put in this infrastructure. And I think we all know how a survey will go on. Are you happy with town's cell service? So I certainly would like to continue to keep the community informed, put out information as we can, because we do receive feedback on this. I know we've all seen periodic emails from individuals generally in favor of it. A few comments of people saying they don't want to do it, and I get that. But now we're starting to have some real numbers and some real data, and I think it is something the town has consistently expressed support for, either in surveys or in elections. The election was certainly much more of an exploratory language. I 100% grant that. But I do generally like the direction. I don't love the super long payback, but that's also the benefit of us not needing to do this for a profit. We are providing a service that does also tend to pay for itself and provide some level of revenue for the town. So those are my thoughts as I'm just thinking out loud here.
Robert?
Thanks. Mark, I really appreciate your business perspective on this. And I guess I view this as oftentimes we want to run our town like a business, but there are times when we're performing a government function and that the analysis maybe is a little bit different. I think broadband, if you view it as a utility, you look at this and say, you don't implement utilities to make a return on investment. You don't put in a road to get your money back unless it's a toll road, right? You don't put in a car park to get your money back. You do those to benefit the community. I think the proposal here has a little bit of the best of both worlds, which is you are able to provide a utility and you are able to recover some money. We can play with the model. The 26 years on the model is with no accelerator and it's at that 74.95 rate. We could look at the model and say, hey, if we're charging $85, do we get our money back at 22 years? Or we played with it a little bit. So we can work on that stuff. My fear is that if we don't do this, it will never happen in Timnath. Especially the residents that are here now are likely to never get this quality of internet. New builds may get it through private companies that can be profitable there because the cost of installing the infrastructure is significantly less. But for the soon to be 8,000 or 10,000 residents here that are here now, they'll just never have it. The other truth is the longer we wait to do this, the more it will cost. It costs more to retrofit than to do new builds. Inflation continues to kill us in all of our projects. And so I want to be mindful of how we move forward. But I also think there's some benefit in moving sooner rather than later.
Okay.
I'll tell you the one thing that I think maybe we should just double check before moving forward is there's a recommendation to go with a partner here that we're going to invest $30 million in. And I want to make sure that it's the right partner. And it's not that I don't trust the people that already scored them, but that is a huge investment. And I'm just wondering, if there's something I have a hesitation about, it's about choosing the wrong partner. Not that there's anything wrong with Pulse, but just, have we really done our due diligence in that one? So generally, I'm supportive of continuing to move this process forward. I think that we need to have continued discussions about funding. If we try to do it with existing reserves and, future tax revenue, it's going to be a slower project. If we want to have this something that comes community-wide in the near term, then I think we need to be open to alternative models, whether that's a bond, whether or not that's looking at, sales tax, we may also, and I just throw this out as a possibility, we may also have a special election come up this year. And if we're sending out ballots anyways, it could be worth exploring other ballot measures and ask questions like bonds or.
Just say, Carolyn, make sure you get
You're
my,
gonna say,
thank you. Go ahead, keep going.
So I just, that could be an opportunity.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I want the council and then I'd like your comment, Carolyn. Luke?
Yeah, I'm generally in support of continuing to move forward. Excuse me, my thoughts is the demand is not going to stop. I look at, we want to be thinking about new families moving in here, the different kind of land use that we're looking at. And I just see demand increasing. From my personal perspective, I just think that I get frustrated when I'm trying to work, and I know everybody else in the neighborhood's trying to work, and it slows down significantly. So I think that this is there, even though we take these surveys and we look and say, well, only 50% are not going to benefit. I look at some of the kids around and the demand that they'll drive. And I think that there will be greater benefit to our community than just people taking those surveys. I, like everybody else, have concerns about the business plan. I think it's just numbers that need to be worked out, and moving forward with those, I think that gives me a clearer picture. I do like the idea that, offering financial assistance. I just don't want to price our model so that we price ourselves out to those who need it most. So I like that ACP program. I think that that's great. I would like to continue forward, and to the point of how fast, I think I'd like to move faster than slower. But again, I'm conscious about costs, right? There are opportunity costs. We've got, we earn money in the bank at 4.75%. So there is opportunity cost in getting a 1% return in our first year. So there is that. So, but I do think I would support the idea of continuing to look into this.
Carolyn, you were going to make a comment on the dovetailing the bond with if we have a potential town vote.
right, so a Tabor election cannot be held at a special election. It needs to be held at either the town's general election for council or in November combined with a general election. So you are still plenty early out that you could put it on a November ballot. You need to certify a ballot question by September. So you've got a lot of time to look at that. And after that, the next opportunity would be next April.
Great. Thank you, Carolyn.
Carolyn, just real quick. Would you agree that we could run a non-Tabor question that could inform the town's direction without spending money?
Like just a kind of like a survey of, are you in support of this, or would it be an actual initiative that you'd be referring to the voters?
So it could be an initiative directing direction for the town, but not authorizing the spending of money, with the recognition that if, for example, it were a bond question, it would need to come back.
Yes, you could do an initiative at a special election. You would have to, if it is a Tabor question, so either if it approves a new tax or it approves a multi-fiscal year obligation like a debt, then that has to be at one of those Tabor elections.
Thanks.
So I'm going to look at next steps just to go, and then if I'm putting the cart before the horse, tell me what's going on and stuff. Here's sort of what I see, and I'd like head nods on some of it to give direction back to the staff. So going forward, do we want at this point to direct staff, as it says in the first bullet, finalize IGI terms with the pulse? Or do we want them to take some more review and look at some other alternatives?
I'll tell you, for me, I'm not looking for a broad review of alternatives. I think we've already kind of looked at that, but I would like maybe just a little bit deeper dive in which provider.
Okay. Brett, do you have a comment?
I mean, I generally agree with Robert there that I think we have kind of reviewed this pretty deeply when we were first starting these work sessions on this. So I'm okay with this next step on the slide.
Next step, finally, is finalizing the IGA.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. Luke? You are. Lisa?
I am, but I would say that I would probably not want us to sign anything until we kind of know or have a discussion about potential funding for it.
So I think we're at a 2.5. And so I would make sure if you're negotiating with, correct me guys if I'm not hearing what our consensus is, that you enter into or begin finalizing IGA terms with the Pulse with the idea that if you want to, you bring back a tentative and preliminary only to us to take a look at. Is everyone happy with that? Okay, I think we're all happy with that.
Any IGA that would be entered into between the Timnath and Loveland would have to be adopted by both councils.
Right.
So-
but I think we're not wanting to, I think we want another study session as opposed to a formalized resolution.
And
Yeah, I think we're right.
would you be okay with that taking the form of an executive session where
Sure.
we're talking about specific negotiation terms? that we
Oh,
might
yeah,
not
we'd
wanna
have to because Pulse and Connection are
Sure.
competitors. We get that. Do we want to consider and direct them to look at because I don't think it's been on here yet, direct the possibility of doing a bond issue, which would, it'd probably be in phases on the bond, but that it would speed up the build out of the broadband and we take it to the voters, which accomplishes two things. One is it gives us direction of would the voters want to pay for and incur the cost of a broadband through the use of a bond. That was your idea, Brett. So if you want to talk first.
Yeah, I just would like to know more what that scenario would look like, both in terms of construction, financials. There's a lot of pieces that would have to be worked out with something like that. So yeah, that'd be something I would like.
If possible, I would love to get some kind of financial analysis about a bond as well as potentially what a sales tax increase or something like that as well. I know in the past, sales taxes have not gone over well, but it's never been necessarily earmarked for something. And so what that potentially might look like, partly because I know a good chunk of our sales tax does come from outside residents as well. And so just kind of what the differences of those might look like and kind of discuss both of those options.
Robert, you agree? And
Yeah, I was just making the point that, well, everyone hates raising taxes when you can get other people to pay for your stuff. Sometimes that's not a horrible thing.
so, and I'm 100% behind the idea of getting either having the community vote for a bond or vote for a sales tax increase and giving us back an analysis of how that would work, what you would suggest for it, and the idiosyncrasies, working with Carolyn to tell us exactly how, because I don't think I know this council hasn't ever passed a sales tax increase, and I feel pretty good we haven't ever passed a bond. So we're going to need some education on that. That we can have as an open session, and I'd like that as an open session, but the negotiation with somebody, I think, has to be, we have to be considerate of our future partner, let's say. Okay, and then who said licensing? Did any of us? I heard the word licensing. I did? No. Because Greeley, you were talking about Greeley licensing. He did it. But I'll take responsibility for it at the time. Do we want them to explore the idea of licensing? And is there somebody that would say, yeah, we'd be happy to come in and licensing, because there's probably more profit in it. And in their research for the IGA with Pulse, and in their research with, I guess that's it. Oh, no, and research into other ISP providers, which is what Robert thought. Can they look into a different funding model, that being licensing?
I guess I would just ask the question, do you feel like that's ground that we've tread already, or is there new veins to tap in that question?
I appreciate that. That was a question I was going to ask of council. So when we did the broadband study, we looked at all the incumbent providers that currently serve Timnath. We looked at the various delivery models that are delivering broadband to various communities, including license agreements, including P3 agreements. And, after the previous work session, the direction was focus on municipal providers because of what's happening in the region, their accessibility, the redundancy and resiliency of their networks, all of that, and being able to control that through an IGA method. So I guess my question would be, how much more do we go back to the P3 model delivery and, the private ISP alternatives that were already discussed and reviewed in the study? Certainly we can do that again. The models in the industry, can be very complicated. Brian mentioned the one in Windsor. Certainly the model in Greeley is different relative to a kind of a P3 agreement. And we can bring more details around that if that's something this council would be interested in. But we did cover a good portion of that already in the study. So
I'll speak for myself real quick. I would like to see that. I mean, there's smart people in Windsor, there's smart people in Greeley. They went through that model. Why did they do it? Whereas we're not even been given that as a suggestion of something to review. Not that I'm complaining, I'm just saying I'm not sure that we've really analyzed that as a issue.
I personally think we did that in the first round, so I'm okay excluding that right now, but I'll do whatever everybody wants.
I do think at some point we do got to pick a direction, explore every single possible scenario. So I'm comfortable with the direction we're going, but I certainly hope that the mayor wants more information, that you're able to provide that for him. And then if you find something interesting, let us know.
Luke.
I think for me, I say we continue down the direction we're going, but if the numbers start to deteriorate or there's things that happen in that business model, I think we have the ability to bring it back up, and that's how I'd like to go.
I'd like to continue on the path that we've gone, direction we're headed.
Okay. So I'm going to do a summary now, and then if Keith, you and I think at this point would be best, because we can read, it'd be best is to, if you have questions of us, which we haven't had you ask us any yet, if you have questions of us, that we answer that. But let me sort of summarize so we don't go backtrack through some stuff. So what I'm hearing the council to say is that we would like you to go ahead and review an IGA with Pulse, getting your best deal that you can get. That said, that everybody knows it's tentative and preliminary for discussion purposes. Okay. That we look into the idiosyncrasies and the accounting for if we issued a bond and the accounting for if we increased and set up a sales tax. And maybe my suggestion is that we set up a committee to sit there and review that. And I'm going to suggest that Carolyn be on that committee. I'd like Brett, if you wouldn't mind being on that committee, and then, you know, one or two staff people to be on it. So, well, Keith, obviously, and so Brian, since you both have been there, maybe that's the committee, is the four of you, and come up with a plan that way.
Mayor, do we think maybe someone from the town finance committee might be good on that?
Sure.
Well, if I could, Mark, I would recommend Lisa as the
That's
finance
right.
director.
Good recommendation. Lisa, speak up. So good recommendation. Thank you. So let's put Lisa, and she's on the finance committee. I mean, we could have somebody else if you want.
I know we have a citizen member or two there, so
Do you think a citizen member would be good?
I'd appreciate that perspective.
Okay. Why don't, let's ear tag that we'll put a citizen member on it, and Lisa and I can talk about our suggestion on who we'd like to put that on. Is that okay? Okay. Okay, so that takes care of finally. So maybe I need to ask the council this. Do we want to go as far as designing feeder routes until we get this a little bit more cemented? Yes, sir.
I think before they answer that question, I just want to say that some of the benefit of having that stuff in place is that it sets us up to apply for grant funding if we have specific projects identified. So I think there's a point where we can take these things so we're prepared for that, but we're not actually doing, we're not doing any construction or anything like that. And that work.
So you're saying you want the design so you can show it to potential grantors for it. Okay.
Correct. And that,
I think that's reasonable. Okay. We all agree it's reasonable.
and
Sir.
that work is already included in the current Ditesco contract that's been approved.
Okay.
So that's not new money.
And then construction of feeders, I don't think we're giving the go ahead yet. Design of FTTP.
Fiber to the premise.
Are we giving okay to that? Okay, pardon?
If there's needs.
Yeah, absolutely. And then construction of town center in Summerfield, we're on hold with that. Okay.
Mhm.
And we can, sooner you can get back to us, that's fine. So we're not trying, I don't think we at all are saying slow up. We're just saying we need more info.
Yep. And so the way I'm recording it is that the deal point stuff we'll handle in an executive session. We'll schedule a work session to talk about the sales tax and bond issue as it comes out of the committee that's been appointed.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Thanks. Okay. Keith and Brian, we're getting to the witching hour. If there's something absolutely that you think we should need or discuss or make a head nod on, let's do it now real quick. If not, let's give us a 10-minute rest. Are you okay with that? Are you okay with that, Keith? Hey, thank you for your work, council. Good thinking.
Mark,
yes, sir.
If you're interested, I do have the language. It's been sent to me.
Okay.
So if you want to, just to put a button on that, the verbiage from the survey was, how interested are you in allocating significant town resources?
You win.
And then in parentheses, it says dollars, staff time, et cetera, to the following potential services. And then there was a list. And the first one on the list was improved access to high-speed internet or broadband services. So that's the verbiage for the record.
All right, slap me around. Okay. All right, that all sounds good. You guys good? Here? I would like a motion to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we are adjourned.
So I'm sure each and every person
Well,
has a different number in
Yeah, that's probably true too. That's probably true too. But at this point, I'm not going to
Are we ready? All right. I will call the March 28th regular town council meeting to order. Mayor Mark Sukup.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Brett Hansen.
Here.
Councilmember Lisa Lake.
Here.
Councilmember Robert Oxmacher.
Present.
Councilmember Luke Wagner.
Here.
Aaron, any amendments to the agenda? Okay. Melissa, do you want to start the public comment?
Okay, let's see. First up for general public comment is Bill Jenkins.
Dr. Bill Jenkins, 5507 Sugarloaf Court. As you're probably aware, I'm the spokesperson for the Timnath grassroots organization Guide Our Growth, Timnath. All members of this organization are town residents and registered voters. This organization is the originator of the current petition aimed at limiting fence heights to no more than 65 feet within the town. Little background. I'm an entrepreneur and co-founder of an educational software business that employed around 300 people and was listed on the NASDAQ exchange and generated as much as 60 million in annual revenue. Nearly all of our jobs provided a living wage, family health benefits, and retirement accounts. I understand the benefits of good business to a community and the value of responsible capitalism. I'm also a scientist with over 50 patents and an educator, and I'm presently retired, except for some consulting with a major educational software company and substitute teaching of math, science, English, social studies in Poudre School District. I have no personal commercial interests within the town of Timnath. Like all of you, I love Timnath. I understand that all of you are volunteering considerable personal time in the belief that you are helping to guide our town operations and growth for the benefit of its citizens. Similarly, the members of Guide Our Growth are also residents who love Timnath. We are not anti-growth. We want to see Timnath flourish, attract good new businesses and opportunities for its citizens to enjoy living and working here and raising their families in a healthy environment. We, Guide Our Growth, think that the 2020 comprehensive plan, the development and design standards for the I-25 corridor are good guiding documents for further development of our town. Now, despite what the public relations staff working for Ladera would have you believe, we are not opposed to the Ladera development project per se. We are, however, strongly opposed to development that requires numerous variances from town building and land use codes. We are opposed to the development that violates established I-25 corridor standards and aspects of the comprehensive plan. And we are opposed to development that we believe will result not only in an eyesore to our community, but will harm important quality of life features that we hold precious for Timnath. So, Council, I hope you will understand why we will be so persistent and passionate about our desire to keep Timnath clean, green, and serene. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Melissa.
Next is Mel Wright.
Good evening to everyone. My name is Mel Wright. I actually live in Fort Collins. I was at one time part of the Timnath growth area, Fort Collins and Nexus. So just up here on I-25 on this side of the highway. So east of Fort Collins, I guess. I just want to say I'm here to actually support Top Off and the Ladera project. Even though I live in Fort Collins, we basically, everybody who lives up here from Wellington all the way up to Estes Park, we all make up NOCO, Fort Collins. I mean, that's just the reality. So let me list a few pros that I think, and I'll list cons and just discuss them. But as far as the location, I doubt if there's a more suitable location in a lot of ways. Now, I drive to Denver probably once a week. I go by to Thornton, Top Golf. And at first it bugged the heck out of me. I can agree with that. However, it's one of those things like the rest of developments. After a while, you get tired. You kind of ignore it. It's kind of like a tall skyscraper. But anyway, I think the project meets the requirements for Timnath. And I realize they keep ever changing. I mean, that's just the reality of the world. But it's perfect location for families up here in NOCO, families from duffers to kids, the whole project and the area really fits very well. Now I realize obviously there's some people that probably live close by. I'd be irritated also, but in the overall scheme, it fits with NOCO and what most of us would want. There's many positives along with that, from social to recreational, economic aspects, which you guys are all more aware of than I. I'm a retired chemist from General Electric, lived in Colorado since 1964. So I've seen Denver go from a cow town to what it is, moved up to Fort Collins because it was a cow town in 2013, and it took it about 2016 to all of a sudden, there's so many people here, what the hell? So one of the big arguments is traffic and population. As much as I would love to be Portland or Boulder or even communist China, where they tried to eliminate growth by the one child, the reality is people are coming here. We want to all get out of Denver. So what's missing up here is a great area for adults. Fort Collins, basically, I want to say Fort Collins is CSU playground anymore. All of the good restaurants are now more CSU students. I can see, quote unquote, the east side of I-25 being quality homes, quality facilities, quality restaurants, more than in Fort Collins.
We're done.
I appreciate the time.
No problem.
So,
Thank you very much. Melissa?
Lynn Christie.
Good evening. My name is Lynn Christie and I live at 5821 River Bluff Drive. I would like to reflect specifically on the green portion of the clean, green, and serene vision found in Timnath's comprehensive plan. With all the attention given to driving down our energy consumption in the United States and efforts to reduce global warming, I've been curious how a Topgolf meets the green vision of Timnath, especially with its climate-controlled open bays. Topgolf, per their website, is open 363 days per year with operating hours between 13 to 14 hours per day, always extending until at least 11 p.m. at night. Therefore, Topgolf must heat the open bays all winter long during the cool fall and spring days and nights, and even for those cool summer evenings. As an electrical engineer, I decided it might be worth calculating the energy consumption of a Topgolf just for the heating of those bays. As a result of my research, the Topgolfs I found have bays heated either by gas-powered radiant heaters or by shortwave electric heaters. I also found that some Topgolf locations use 3 heaters per bay, such as in Minnesota and Indiana, and others use 2 heaters per bay. For my calculations, I copied an actual Topgolf spec that used 2 kilowatt shortwave heaters with a quantity of 2 per bay. The 2 kilowatt heaters consume 2 kilowatts of power per hour or 2 kilowatt hours of energy. If a bay is heated for 7 hours, that is 2 heaters times 2 kilowatts per hour times 7 hours for a total of 28 kilowatt hours. That is just for a single bay utilized at 50%. For 31 days or a month of such 50% utilization, this is 868 kilowatt hours. And for a year for this single bay at 50% heater utilization, that's 10,164 kilowatt hours. Do you know what the average annual energy consumption for a US residential utility customer was in 2021? It was 10,632 kilowatt hours for an average of 886 kilowatt hours per month. This is approximately the same energy consumption of our single bay model. Now multiply this by every bay in a Topgolf. Also, keep in mind, these numbers do not include the energy required to heat the rest of the facility, to cool in the summer, to power massive spotlights, and prepare the food. This is just the energy consumed by the hitting bay space heaters to heat the great outdoors. Now, granted, this is just a model where you could argue the hours of the heater utilization are too high or too low, or perhaps there should be 3 heaters instead of 2 heaters. But what you can't argue is this structure sucks energy in a huge way to heat those hitting bays. And all this when we are trying to reduce our energy consumption. Does Topgolf's open design and energy consumption align with our town's clean, green, and serene vision? Not to mention aligning with efforts to protect our planet from global warming? My
Thank
thought is
you.
probably not. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is Dan Etheridge.
Yeah, my name is Dan Etheridge. I reside at 5765 Isabella Avenue. Mr. Mayor, members of Town Council, Planning Commission, good evening. A January 2014 research study by members of the Migratory Bird Center of the Smithsonian Conservation Biology Institute and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service estimates that between 365 and 988 million birds die each year due to collisions with man-made structures, including communication towers, wind turbines, power lines, and buildings. Especially with buildings containing large glass surfaces that birds either do not see or see reflections of surrounding landscape that they mistake for the real thing. The study estimates that between 2 and 9% of North American birds are killed each year by this type of collision. In an October 2017 research article published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences by members of the Cornell Lab of Ornithology in New York Audubon, it was shown that brightly lit structures at night may disorient many birds, interfering with their migratory patterns and draw them into areas where collisions are possible. In an unfortunate side effect of the September 11th Memorial Tribute in Light, the twin beams of light aimed into the night sky disrupted bird behaviors for over 1 million birds on the 7 anniversary nights of 9/11 over a 7-year period. In an article in Science Magazine published September 19, 2019, a study revealed that the North American avian species have seen a drop in population of nearly 3 billion birds since 1970. Another group affected by urban development are the many bat species in North America. These mammals are already being heavily impacted by white nose syndrome, a fungal disease having spread throughout the US and responsible for millions of bat deaths. Some species of bat have been or may soon be placed on the endangered species list. We need to be considering the welfare of these species when we propose developments in their territories. Bats feed on insects at night and are attracted to many insects which are attracted to lights. Bright lights at night will draw many bats into these areas. If these areas are in close proximity to large netting, the bats are more prone to collisions and entanglement in the nets. On March 24, 2023, a letter was addressed to Timnath Planning Department from the Fort Collins Audubon Society, Audubon Rockies, the Colorado chapter of the International Dark Sky Association, and Colorado State University field ornithologists. This letter is a follow-up letter to a previous letter of July 2022. This letter highlights many of the concerns I have detailed tonight, as well as additional information. Having not heard a response from their previous letter, they request the opportunity to discuss this issue further and work together to better understand the impacts of development in Timnath to the wildlife community. Will the town of Timnath respond to requests from these groups and similar requests from Colorado Parks and Wildlife? Due to the wide interest in this topic, will the town of Timnath, rather than requiring a core request, share this information publicly as an act of transparency, as often referenced by the town council? Though their letters are primarily focused on the proposed Topgolf facility, I believe this issue goes further than that. I strongly urge the Timnath Planning Department to consider the impact of any development on local wildlife and put into place thoughtful practices to help protect these species. On a related note, have you all noticed our Heron Welcoming Committee at Harmony and I-25 on the cell towers? And
Dan, you've used your 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Next is Irv Christie.
Good evening. My name is Irvin Christie, and I live at 5821 River Bluff in Timnath Ranch. I've worked in industry for 20 plus years, primarily in high-tech business development roles. And I'm here today to refute some of the claims that have been provided by previous town council speakers about the supposed high-quality jobs that Topgolf might bring. I'm also a member of the Guider Growth Core Team, which comprises residents who support thoughtful development that is in concert with Timnath's 2020 comprehensive plan. In that plan, there are several references to the need to attract employers that match the local workforce. And this combination would ensure Timnath is a sustainable community that provides a unique lifestyle environment and well-paying jobs. According to the latest US Census report, the median household income in zip code 80547 is $156,000. That's $87,000 higher than the US median household income of 69,000. We are a desirable demographic for entertainment companies to target. This compares favorably also to other nearby zip codes such as 80528 at 118,000, 80546 at 115,000, and 80550 at 109,000. However, when you look at the jobs that Topgolf might bring into Timnath, I think we can do better. According to numerous sources such as Glassdoor, Zippia, and Indeed, the average starting compensation at Topgolf is $17 an hour or $19,000 a year. The average compensation at the Thornton Topgolf per public sources is $34,000 a year. Based upon the current 813 jobs that are currently open at Topgolf, 63% of those openings are part-time. These part-time positions at Topgolf do not provide benefits or healthcare or anything like that. This source also report that 57% of Topgolf employees stay at the role less than 2 years, and only 2% of the employees are over 40 years old. Even a role as a full-time manager at Topgolf pays $44,000, not nearly enough to afford the average home price of $609,000 in Timnath. Now, recognizing that this Ladera area is zoned as a regional commercial development, I realize that retail, restaurants, and our entertainment businesses are likely candidates for that area, and we fully support that. However, when you look at other retail establishments in the area, they're much better employers. Costco, for example, average tenure is over 9 years. Average compensation is $44,000, and they offer healthcare for full-time and part-time employees. Even Walmart pays better at average salary of $52,000 a year. I believe that Timnath can and should work to attract quality employers for that special place in the area. We don't need more low-paying part-time jobs, which will require employers to drive to the location from outside of the area. And with proper investment in economic development, we can attract employers that we can all be proud of, and at the same time eliminate the known impacts on the natural resources and beauty of the area. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to double check. Craig, are you wanting to speak on 60? Craig? Armstrong? No? Okay. You didn't want to talk on anything? Okay.
Is that it?
Yes, that's it.
Great, thank you. Reports. Council. Finance, Lisa, do you have anything to add? Don, do you have anything to add? Matt, do you have anything to add? Okay. Chief Jones, do you have anything to add?
The chief had to step out,
Okay.
but he told me, he's texting me. He says he doesn't have anything else unless you have questions.
Okay, no.
Mark, we missed the consent agenda.
Excuse me?
We missed the consent agenda.
Thank you. So could I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move to approve the consent agenda as in the packet.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The consent agenda passed unanimously. Resolution number 23, series 2023, a resolution making certain findings of fact and declaring eligibility of the proposed annexation of a parcel of land to the town of Timnath, known as White Wing at Timnath Manor annexation. Chad.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, council members. Items 6A, 6B, and 6C are all related to the same property, so I'm going to present them all at once, if that works for the council. So the first item that you mentioned is a resolution concluding that the property described as White Wing at Timnath Manor is eligible for annexation and complies with the Colorado Revised Statute. Items 6B and 6C are for the approval of the annexation and zoning of the property located at 5536 East County Road 40. The property is currently owned by Timnath Land Holdings and the applicant is Bamford Companies, both represented by Mr. Greg Bamford. The petition for this annexation was brought forth to town council for substantial compliance on January 24th. Following your approval, noticing for today's public hearing was published for 4 consecutive weeks in the Colorado. The subject property is located north of Bus Grove and just southwest of the Timnath Reservoir, consisting of a parcel of land totaling in roughly 40 acres. The property is currently located in the unincorporated Larimer County and falls within the town's growth management area. Approximately 1,320 feet of the property's southern boundary is immediately adjacent to the town, meeting the 1/6 contiguity required for annexation. With this annexation, the applicant is requesting to amend the town zoning map for this property to estate residential, complying with the town's comprehensive plan, which is rural residential. The applicant is proposing a large lot residential development in accordance with a maximum density of 1 unit per acre for the estate residential zoning district. And then just as a reminder to council and anyone listening in, this is just the first step of the town's development process. The proposed development is greater than 6 lots, so it would need to go through the major subdivision process, which would include sketch plan, preliminary plat, and final plat, just so everyone is aware there. These applications and the petition have been reviewed against state statute and the Timnath Land Use Code. The White Wing and Timnath Manor annexation and rezoning applications were presented to Planning Commission on March 7th, where they recommended approval of items 6B and 6C by unanimous vote. With that, staff is recommending approval of those items, 6A, 6B, and 6C for the annexation of White Wing at Timnath Manor. If you have any questions, staff would be happy to answer them. Also, the applicant is in attendance as well if you have any questions for him.
Any questions? Anybody? Any questions?
I'm just curious, the applicant would be willing to take an opportunity to just talk a little bit about the vision for the property?
About the what?
The vision for the property? Sharon, if there's any information on that?
My name is Greg Bamford, 325 South Higley Road, Suite 110, Gilbert, Arizona. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I'm not sure I understood the question.
Yeah, I'm just wondering what the vision is for this property. I know there's a lot of
using the word division.
Vision.
Vision.
Vision. Oh,
Vision.
okay.
In other words, what are you planning to do with it?
Okay, sure. It'll be the large lot estate rural residential. Most of the lots will be 30,000 square feet. There'll be a few smaller ones to deal with the terrain and with the widening that's going to happen with Bus Grove Road and the realignment of Lake Canal. 20% open space, which will include the very southwestern portion. If you look at these maps and especially the aerials, you'll see that green belt cutting across the southwest corner. That is Lake Canal. And there's 3 or 4 acres to the southwest of that we'll make into a public park, which will be available to the community, not just to White Wing residents. There will be other open space areas within the project that will serve for open space for residents. It will be a gated community. We'll have emergency access to the east side in connection with that white dot just off of our northeast corner is the water tower for Fort Collins Loveland Water Service, which we are annexed into that service area, and we'll share an emergency lane in case something might happen catastrophic at our entryway that would prohibit ingress or egress. Then we would be able to exit north out on that emergency lane. So what we see, our experience, and we've built 535 of these lots in 5 subdivisions that we're patterning. That's in the Phoenix metro area, although my real home is at Haxton, Colorado, 130 miles east of here. Went to CSU. Some of my old buddies are here tonight to cheer me on from CSU. At any rate, we're glad to be able to bring this concept and hope to duplicate the template that we've had very successful in our Southeast Phoenix metro area, which is back to your vision. These will be lots that are, we will build all of the infrastructure. We are not home builders. We will build all the parks, the gates, the common area, underground utilities, and we will sell the lots to people that want to build their dream home. And we will help them through that process because they will come through architecture review, landscape review to maintain a quality and character of the subdivision. It'll be very diverse architecture. We'll see a lot of secondary buildings for home office shops. They'll be the same character as the main home, the same materials, the same concept. And we stay involved. I say we, my son and I are owners of the property, and we will stay involved in all that architecture and landscape review to bring this quality. This fits so squarely within the plan of the community, the general plan, because of the density, the low density, because of our common boundary for a half mile of the quarter on the north, quarter on the east with the reservoir. And we've had good relationships with our neighbors. And we believe that there'll be a market for this. It's going to be a couple of years by the time we get through the planning process before we'll be ready to start getting people to help them with their homes. Does that kind of help you with the vision?
That is perfect. Thank you for sharing that. Helps us.
I got a real quick question, actually, which I usually don't have these, but there's a curiosity question. So if you're gated and you're going to have the park there on the southwest corner, is there going to be an opening there for people to get to then?
It's heavily pedestrian designed. One of Matt Blakely's early comments when we started, we had a meeting with you conceptually long ago now, and then we followed up with Matt and staff, and we're heavily developing this on a pedestrian access. There'll be trails through the subdivision that will be open to the public, pedestrian and bicycle, and there'll be areas that will allow access to this area that you're talking about. In other words, yes, there will be pedestrian access coming into the subdivision, into that park area that doesn't come through the main entryway of the subdivision.
So the gate is mainly designed to keep away automobiles.
Somewhat of a control. This is a remote operated gate. It's not a manned guard gate, which is much higher in security than what this will be, but at least it will allow people to have some control over vehicular traffic coming into the community.
Thanks, Mr. Bamford. Anybody else? Thank you.
Thanks to all the staff and helping us get along. I've got a little more work to do with Don on our sewer connection, but we're moving along. Everything is
great
in the right
That's
direction.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chad, do you have anything further?
No, I do not.
Now, I noticed there's not a public hearing on this first one. Is that correct?
That's correct. Not on the first one, but on the following two.
Great, thank you. So do I have a motion to approve resolution number 22, series 2023, a resolution making certain findings of fact and declaring eligibility of the proposed annexation of a parcel of land to the town of Timnath, known as White Wing at Timnath Manor annexation?
I move to approve a resolution making certain findings of fact and declaring the eligibility of the proposed annexation of a parcel of land known as White Wing at Timnath Manor to the town of Timnath as it meets all criteria for annexation.
A second. Okay, thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. 6B, ordinance number 9, we've got a public hearing.
I will open the public hearing at 6:31. Nobody is signed up to speak on these matters.
Do you want to speak? Okay.
Oh, we have someone? Okay. Okay. Raymond Wright.
Raymond Wright, 5250 Old Town, Timnath. Back when I was Planning Commission Chairman years ago, we had in our comprehensive plan, no gated communities. So I'm wondering, when did that change and why did it change and the reasons behind that?
Let's see. So we don't take questions for public hearing, but if you'd like to stay after and ask Keith or Chad, they'll be happy to answer.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mayor, I have a question for Keith or Chad. Is there any background on history of gated communities in our plans?
Thanks for that, Robert. There's not, that was a previous code requirement that was in when we redid the land use code in 2015. That requirement was taken out, but we've had no gated communities in the town thus far.
Mayor, I will close the public hearing at 6:33.
Thank you. Ordinance number 9, series 2023, an ordinance approving annexation for property known as White Wing at the Timnath Manor to the town of Timnath. Do I have a motion to approve?
I move to approve ordinance number 9, series 2023, an ordinance approving annexation for the property known as White Wing at Timnath Manor to the town of Timnath.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed. Ordinance number 9, series 2023, an ordinance approving the annexation of property known as White Wing at the Timnath Manor to the town of Timnath was approved unanimously. 6C, ordinance number 10, public hearing.
I will open the public hearing at 6:34. There's no one to speak. I will close the public hearing at 6:34.
Okay, I don't see anybody. Okay, ordinance number 10, series 2023, an ordinance approving a zoning plan, a zoning map amendment for the annexation of the property known as White Wing at Timnath Manor. Do I have a motion to approve?
I move to approve ordinance number 10, series 2023, an ordinance approving a zoning map amendment for the annexation of the property known as White Wing at Timnath Manor.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ordinance number 10, series 2023, an ordinance approving the zoning map amendment for the annexation of property known as White Wing at Timnath Manor, passed unanimously. Resolution number 24, series 2023, a resolution approving the Timnath Ranch 9th filing preliminary plat. Staff.
Thank you, Mayor. As you mentioned, this is the Timnath Ranch 9th filing preliminary plat. The owner is T-Rock LLC, represented tonight by Jason Sherrill, and the applicant is TB Group, represented tonight by Mike Walker. This 9th filing is located west of Schoolhouse Drive, south of Harmony Road, and north of Stone Point Drive, kind of on the west side of the Timnath Ranch subdivision. The zoning of the property is a combination of CC, R3, and R4. This proposal is to provide 29 single-family detached lots, 38 paired home lots, 340 single-family attached townhome lots, and then 2 development tracts for 100 condominium units for a total of 507 units within the roughly 109 acres. This preliminary plat also is providing for 5 future commercial development tracts within roughly 37 acres along the Harmony frontage. This preliminary plat meets our parks and space open space requirements for R3 and R4 zoning, along with Harmony corridor landscaping along the Harmony Road frontage. This plan is including a roughly 1.3 acre park central to the development, and then roughly 37% open space, which exceeds the 25% requirement for R3 and R4 zoning. And then of that 37%, they are providing 53% as usable by the way of multiple green areas, courtyards, plazas, multi-use pathways, and then the park. The gross density for this area is roughly 7 dwelling units per acre, which complies with the R3 district requirements of maximum of 8, and then the R4 zoning district maximum of 24 units per acre. The parking requirement for a development like this would essentially be 2 parking spaces per unit. Each housing product does have a garage parking and driveway parking to meet the 2 spaces per units. They are also with a combination of all of those garage and driveway spaces, they are providing just roughly 1,800 spaces on those lots at a ratio of roughly 3.5 spaces per units. They are also providing 177 off-street parking spaces spread throughout the project for overflow and guest parking mixed amongst the townhomes and over by the condominiums as well, to bring the rough total of number of spaces to just roughly 2,000 parking spaces. The minimum lot size for the townhomes is between 1,800 and 5,200 square feet, and then 2,200 to 2,900 square feet for the paired homes, and then roughly 7,400 to 13,500 square feet for the detached single-family lots. There was a neighborhood meeting on this property held on October 24th at the town center. And that observation report is within your packet on comments and concerns by the residents. Planning Commission approved this preliminary plat back on March 7th by a vote of 4-1 with Commissioner Jose voting against the proposal with his concern about the application not being a good fit for the area with the amount of density. This application has been reviewed against code criteria and staff finds it to meet the approved sketch plan and other code criteria. With that, I will turn it over to Mike Walker for a brief presentation.
Thanks, Kevin. Appreciate it. Mayor, Council, thank you for all your time reviewing all the information in these packets. I know there's a lot of information to go over, and looking at this list, there was 60 pages that included ours. So thank you for looking through it. As you know, this is Timnath Ranch, 9th subdivision. My name is Mike Walker with TB Group. We have our entire team here to answer all of your questions that you may have. Jason Sherrill with Landmark Homes, Danny Weber, civil engineer, Ruth Rollins is the traffic engineer, and we all know John Turner as well. So he's here to answer any questions on the commercial side. The next slide right here is the approved sketch plan on the left and our site plan on the right. The sketch plan was approved roughly 3 years ago. Our plan follows it to a T. So I really want to emphasize that we're not asking for any modifications to the land use code. We're not asking for any variances. We've gone through a long approval process to get to this point. There's a lot of residences in the neighborhood that we're trying to be sensitive to as well. But you know, the history of the approval process goes way beyond a lot of the residents that live there. So we're here to answer their questions, to try to make sure that they understand that we are following the rules on here and making a very nice neighborhood with a lot of open space, connectivity. I think everything that is in here in the neighborhood is something that everyone in Timnath can be proud of, and following the land use codes as well. So we think that is important. Jason Sherrill is here to talk about the vision of the neighborhood. And switch on to the next slide.
Good evening, Mayor and Town Board. Jason Sherrill with Landmark Homes. Really, between Kevin's conversation or presentation and Mike, it was very well covered. Just want to highlight kind of the concept of the plan and some of the I think the most important elements, much that we discussed in the sketch plan approval process. But there is a lot of attached homes, but because of the nature of that type of product, we are allowed the opportunity to dramatically increase the amount of open space, over almost 140% increase of open space from the original sketch plan to what we're now providing. So a significant amount of green space, both usable for the region, but also usable for our residents. All the architecture fronts the streets. We tuck the garages down alleyways and private drives. So a lot of front architecture, either fronting the streets and the streetscapes, kind of strengthening the streetscape, but also a lot of those green corridors. If you study the plan, many of our homes actually face pocket parks or that main green spine that's connecting kind of north and south. That is also inclusive of a very significant sidewalk plan. So a lot of very active spaces, very much connecting kind of the south to the north, and within our community, connecting to the eventual, hopefully vibrant commercial center that's to the north side of the property. So I think this really, we're very proud of the plan because of the open space and the types and the variety of architecture and unit types that we're bringing to the market. So happy to answer any questions that you guys have. We're very much looking forward to getting this project approved and bringing it to the community. Thank you.
Jason, it looks like a nice plan, but I'm getting confused. I thought in the presentation you said there were 7 units per acre. No. This is
Yeah,
saying,
on the residential portion, it's 7 units per acre.
so this is saying 8.6 units.
Yeah, when you take out there are portions of the subdivision to the south that aren't necessarily part of the residential with it. When you get down to the residential itself, it is at 7 units per acre.
Down or up?
South, just south of where the yellow lots are. There's portions of open space that are down there that are technically part of this plat.
Okay. And I would highlight that the R4 allows for close to 24 units to the acre, and the R3 is 8. So on average, we're at 8.6, but between the two, we're very low compared to what is allowed in the R4.
Thanks. Anybody else? Thanks, Jason.
You bet.
Actually, may I have
Yes, sir.
a couple of questions? Do we have more speakers? Is that it?
That's it. We got a public hearing.
Okay. Do you want to do questions now or after public hearing?
We have to ask them now.
Okay. I was just wondering if someone could speak to the single planning commissioner's concern that this is not a good fit for the area, and specifically maybe touch on the fact that this area has industrial on one side and Harmony on the other, and kind of from a planning perspective, how all that fits together.
Yeah, Planning Commissioner Jost, all he gave at the Planning Commission hearing was that he felt that the density was a little too high for this area, and felt that it wasn't necessarily an entirely good fit for the Timnath Ranch subdivision. That was generally all the context we got from that meeting with his nay vote.
Okay. And then the condos that are proposed here, how do they compare to, say, the condos across the street here on Stonefly in terms of scope and size?
So Jason would probably be best to answer that, but the condos are intended to be basically 2-story, kind of 8-plex units from that standpoint. So they're only a 2-story product, not a 3-story or anything like that. And they are true condos. What's across the street on Signal Tree and Second are townhomes, and the apartments across the street are true apartments. These would be for sale condominium units. And yeah, they're kind of a 2-level 8-plex, 4 units on each level.
Jason, do you want to add to that at all?
Never have a problem talking. So yeah, so our product, if you might not be familiar with it, but we build a lot of attached homes from Fort Collins to Longmont. So the product that is a condominium is a stacked 4-and-4 product. All the units have a direct access attached garage. Part of what Kevin spoke about, that's the condo product. All our townhomes have 2-car attached garages. All the products have front porches and private yards associated with the units, both the condo and the townhome product. So it's a really, I think, vibrant mix of the condo product, a variety of townhome products, duplex, so 2-unit products, and then single family. And as you notice on the plan, particularly kind of the yellow color, the lower density stuff is more towards the south. It's kind of an appropriate transition from the existing single family, and then it moves into kind of a higher density. You had mentioned the industrial, the higher density condominiums are that edge up against that industrial space. So we tried to think about all those transitions, even to the degree that the 2 parcels on the east side associated kind of the Peanut Drive, those are the lowest density parcels. So kind of pushing the density more internal and along that eastern edge, along that western edge.
Okay. So, along the industrial, something like a single family home there probably wouldn't be marketable given its proximity anyways.
I mean, that's debatable. That's our position. But our product there, for whatever it's worth, actually has two front sides or two front architectures or two front elevations. So we actually, because we still think that even though it's industrial, there's still western views. So there's a lot of value to that. So it has a strong kind of architectural presence along that trail corridor, which I think is important as opposed to a bunch of backyards that are not controlled with landscaping and maintenance. These are controlled, and also front architecture on the kind of that ribbon drive kind of directly to the east side.
Great, thanks. Then Kevin, when the commercial comes around, will that be subject to the Harmony design standards?
Correct. Yeah, any commercial there, since it's 5 larger development tracks, most likely any commercial coming forward would have to go through another plat, or unless there was a larger user for one of those individual tracks. But any commercial is subject to Harmony corridor standards.
Okay, thank you.
Any other? Go ahead, Brad.
Kevin, my understanding was the sketch plan had 188 condo units, and now this is 100. And if I followed all this right, they added a few single family homes, and the rest they kind of swapped out townhomes for some of those condos. So they decreased the higher density units for the medium density, essentially. In my
Correct. Yeah. The original sketch plan was for 480 townhomes and condos combined. And they did change out some of those on the southern area for paired homes, paired single family homes, kind of similar to what you kind of see across the street in Timnath Landings, Timnath Lakes now. To where it looks like just a larger single family detached home. So they did that on the south side and southwest portion as well. Correct.
Okay. And then just kind of speaking to the overall density of the neighborhood, you know, the original sketch plans for this neighborhood approved 1,400 units for Timnath Ranch, if I remember correctly. And then with this change, it was 1,420 for the entire neighborhood of Timnath Ranch. Do those numbers sound accurate?
That's pretty close. Yes.
Okay. So the overall density change to the overall neighborhood is pretty minimal.
Yeah. When the sketch plan back in 2018 was brought forward, that then was approved in 2020. The northeast portion of the subdivision, which we call the 8th filing, was originally sketch plan, master plan for 636 apartment units.
Right.
That got reduced down to 471 roughly. And then that difference was then shifted over to this side to increase. And then so the overall density was a minimal change.
And that 470 was a mix of apartments and townhomes on the east side of the neighborhood.
Correct.
So we actually went from 630 apartments in a 1,400 unit neighborhood to 270 or 80, I think it was.
Correct.
That was the change that we made.
Correct.
Okay. I do have a question for someone from the TV group. I'm going to challenge someone on something here. The sketch plan had 508 units, and this has 507 units. So if I'm understanding correctly, that's essentially using the max density that the sketch plan allowed. That's correct. So I went back and reviewed the meetings from 2020 when we talked about this. And for example, the neighborhood meeting from August of 2020. There were a number of questions in that meeting where residents asked about the number of units that were going to be built. And Mr. Turner responded, and I wrote down what he wrote when he said here. When you actually get the site approved and you go through the open space requirements and all the other requirements, there's not one site we've ever gotten what we paid for. Even the townhome site over here, referring to the east side, it says it's 84 units. I think we ended up at what, 73 units? We ended up at about 90%. So even though we have a zone request, the ability to actually get that request is always less. Responding to another question, we've asked for more units, which at the end of the day, we don't even know if we'll get because it's just zoning. This is not a platting of individual sites. And then reading from the council meeting minutes from September of 2020, Councilmember Hansen asked about the density for R4 and R3, and Mr. Birdsall stated that they would not hit the max density allowed for either area. So I'm hoping someone from the TV group can comment on our apparent hitting of this max number allowed in the sketch plan. If you have any thoughts on it, you can give me on that. And I know I'm putting you on a spot a little bit with this one. I get that.
I appreciate it. To repeat the question, I'm not following.
There were numerous comments made from TV group representatives in 2020 about how They're asking for a certain number of units. They don't expect to hit that number of units. I'm looking at a preliminary plat that essentially hits the number of units that were asked for. When there was multiple meetings, multiple individuals that commented on, we don't expect to hit this max number of units. Can you comment on why this decision was made to essentially hit the max number of units?
Well, I think there was a transfer of units from one side to the other, which ultimately reduced the.
But I'm
units on
referring
this
just to
side.
this sketch plan. You know, you're-
I would call it good planning.
okay.
Go ahead and stand up at the mic, please.
And you can
Thanks.
push back on me. If you think I'm being unfair, like it won't hurt my feelings. Go ahead.
Sorry to cut Mike off like that. Warren Turner, 3291 Danzante Bay, part of the ownership group for Timnath Ranch. I believe what occurred was a discussion related to the zoning that we were applying for at the time and not the sketch plan. For instance, if we look at R4 zoning and the ability to hit 24 units to the acre, we're nowhere near that. If we built to the maximum units allowed, and Kevin, correct me if I'm wrong, that number would be closer to 900 or something between the R3 and the R4. Yeah, I believe that was the intention of the comments at the time, as negating what we're presenting in a sketch plan would be idiotic. We're presenting the sketch plan as something that we want to progress, whereas zoning is something that's flexible.
Okay. So you feel that the comments were reflective of just the general maximum zoning requirements?
Yes, in regards to the meaning behind maximum density allowed by zoning and not the sketch that was presented. The sketches, when they're presented, are meant to be representative of what may occur, whereas zoning, no one expects to hit maximum zoning. No one in town history has hit maximum zoning in terms of density, to my knowledge.
Okay. I mean, that's why I read the quotes from multiple meetings, as you know, there was explicit numbers being raised. And when we were having this discussion 2.5 years ago, it was about the number of units that were being built. Now, in the end, I think your open space numbers are fantastic, and for that reason, I'm not going to push you to reduce 20 units, because I also don't think that would. I think that would feel like a show. It wouldn't actually address any concerns with traffic or anything of that nature. So having 38, 39%, I think was the open space numbers. That's twice what you would get with a single family neighborhood. But what I do is, I guess I especially want to emphasize is there was certainly a very clear impression left about the master planning of this community and how, yeah, you're asking for these number of units, you might not get them. We have this commercial property, and the first thing that's brought in is a liquor store. You know, things like this, these types of decisions and these types of presentations, I do think cost credibility. So I would invite you to keep that in mind as we move forward with any future development applications. I couldn't believe that the first thing you guys brought forward was a liquor store for that commercial development. I was floored by that. So I just really hope we get a lot more thoughtful decisions made regarding the commercial development and how that moves forward going ahead. So that's the point I hope to emphasize today.
Thank you, Brett.
Thank you. That's all the questions I had.
Okay. Anybody else? Let's see. Okay. All right. Well, do I have a motion?
Mayor, it is a public hearing.
It's not on here. Wait, there it is. Sorry. Look down on one. Okay, so Melissa, public hearing.
I will open the public hearing at 6:56. And I have Jim Gross.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. I appreciate it, and staff. I'd like to address the density issues with you. And I got some of my numbers from the town staff because I wanted to make sure they were pretty accurate. Because I don't know the numbers you were throwing out just now, but these are the ones I just got. And I know, since I've only been, I'm sorry, my name is Jim Gross. 6746 Stone Point Drive. So I'm right backed up to this property. I know of what we refer to as Timnath North and Timnath West as those two places. One is a triangle on the other side near the park. And then I took all of the things on this side of the railroad tracks down to the townhouses there, because there's no apartments or anything built there yet. Okay, so I wanted to kind of just for myself see what is that density issue that we're talking about there. And so the information I got was that in that Timnath North area, there were 150 acres in that area. And there are 470 residential pieces there, and that's townhomes and the residential single families. And then I wanted to find out how did that compare to the ninth rendering or ninth filing. And that's 72 acres is what is assigned to just the residential part there. And I think Kevin had that stated today. And there are 507 residents that are projected for that area then. And so what that is really 52% of the total residents for Timnath North is 52% of the residents would be on 32% of the property that's there. So that 72 acres only amounts to 32% of that whole area, which is a density issue in essence. And we spoke to this on multiple times with the public hearings, is extra people, there's the school being able to handle that additional population that's going in, the walking across schoolhouse road, because of the pool is in the middle of the peanut there. Am I done?
Mr. Ghost, yes, so go ahead. We'll give you 4 or 5, sorry, 15 seconds more to sort of conclude your thoughts.
Yeah, and basically it is that there's such a high density in a small portion of the land associated with that whole area. And it's even more diverse when you add Timnath West to it. Real quick, with Timnath West, it would hold 41% in the 72 acres, 41% of the total population of residents, and that would be 22% of the land.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you
so much.
Okay, I have Sal Gross.
My husband. Hello, Mayor and town members and everybody in this room. We just moved here about 1.5 years ago. So a lot of decisions were made before we were here. And one thing on the I have 2 items. One on the density. And you all do really nice work. So we've driven around. If you look at this, there's 1 row of houses, single family houses. There's 56 buildings of multifamily. And I don't think that even includes the condos or anything. And what really, that number 1 concerns me, that probably somewhere around half plus or minus will be townhomes, the rest single family. And I just think that's too much for the area. My other concern is for children. And if I can step over or point, you see the yellow.
You can go ahead and walk over
Okay.
there if you'd like.
My voice isn't real loud. So.
Thank you.
That's all I have. So I will, anybody else want to speak? No. Okay, I will close the public hearing at 7:03.
Okay, any comments, questions? Any comments?
I have a question, Carolyn. Carolyn? Oh, sorry. Let me just, given that we have a plan here that appears to comply with the comprehensive plan, complies with the zoning, and is in compliance with the sketch plan, when it comes to looking at a plat, what, if any, legal basis would the town have? What criteria should we be using to evaluate whether or not we approve this plat or not?
So the criteria are set forth in the staff report. If you look at page, starting on 112 of the staff report, 112 of the packet, it goes through the criteria for review. And those are the criteria that should be considered. So I can read them real quickly.
If you could, and I've reviewed it, but just for those kind of
Sure.
trying to understand what we're doing here.
Okay, number one, the preliminary plat represents a functional system of land use and is consistent with the rationale and criteria set forth in this code, which is the land use code, and the comprehensive plan. Two, the application is consistent with the approved sketch plan and incorporates the Planning Commission's recommendations and conditions of approval. Three, the land use mix within the project conforms to Timnath's zoning district map and the land use map and furthers the goals and policies of the comprehensive plan. Four, the utility and transportation design is adequate, given existing and planned capacities for those systems. Five, the negative impacts to adjacent land uses have been identified and satisfactorily mitigated. And six, there's a need or desirability within the community for the applicant's development, and the development will help to achieve a balance of land use and or housing types within Timnath.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I guess just my comments on this is we do have a proposal that is in compliance with everything that's happened in process up to this point. There's a couple of things in there, points related to the intersection of single family residential and traffic and pedestrian stuff that I think are legitimate concerns. I'm not sure if some of that can be, later taken care of with traffic mitigation. I throw out speed bumps. I hate speed bumps, but I hate kids getting hit by cars as well. So big picture, I think this is in compliance with everything that's been leading up to this point, and I'm going to support it. But I do take those safety concerns especially to heart.
A couple of comments specifically related to that south side. If I remember correctly, the homes that are not highlighted in yellow, the ones that are even further south, a couple years back, I believe we actually extended the area of single family homes to create that bigger buffer. So I just wanted to highlight that piece because that's been a few years, I know, since we did that. So the developer at that time did increase the number just to kind of make the buffer between single family and townhomes a little bit greater. And then so I live just, not too far south of that. I've lived in Timnath now for 11 years and seen a lot of the north side develop. And to keep the number of total units. I think sometimes we focus on one little piece of it, but I think we have to remember that this has been a planned community for quite some time. And to go through all the different processes for the different filings and to come up with a number of units overall that is similar, or I mean, percentage wise, very, very close to the original number, I think is pretty good, especially with all the different changes and things that have to go along with that. Some of the comments we always hear are related to traffic or related to the schools. And we have had Poudre School District staff here who have talked to us and told us that they know of all these numbers, and in their opinion, the school has been, or all the schools in the district have been planned for all of those numbers. I would like to reiterate what Robert said, that maybe we can just kind of keep an eye on what that area looks like as far as kids crossing and things like that, especially if there are cars parked on the street where you can't always kind of see that. I know there's a crosswalk, I think, right by Beth Key, but I think they're talking about an area a little bit north of that. And we all know that kids aren't going to walk out of their way to go to a crosswalk. So maybe we can just kind of keep that in mind and keep an eye on that and what that looks like, and potentially any improvements that we can do that might be needed if something comes up.
Don, I see you chomping at the bit. Would you like to talk?
Yes, Lisa, we look at that area, annually, because the school's there, and we'll continue to do that.
Okay. All right. Resolution number 24, a resolution approving the Timnath Ranch 9th filing preliminary plat. Oops, did we end the public hearing? Okay. Do I have a motion to approve?
I move to approve resolution 24, series 2023, a resolution approving the Timnath Ranch 9th filing preliminary plat.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, I'm going to go off script a little bit, and Chief, I'm going to put you on the spot if you'd walk up to the microphone. But I'd like to publicly acknowledge the Grosses on their little story and what they did for the police department before we go on further.
Oh, well, Mr. Gross is a woodworker, and he, as a result of his father, and I think he had a wood shop in Virginia, he hauled out a piece of wood and he inscribed our badge, which is about 2 feet and by 1 foot of wood carving. It's absolutely beautiful. It will be hung on a place of prominence in our building, and we'll have a gift shortly. Well, it's being manufactured right now with appreciation for the Grosses. So it'll be delivered, but thank you.
Go ahead. If Mrs. Gross, do you mind, you or Chief mind giving a little snippet of that story? I think it's really speaks well to the police department.
I was out of town on business, and my husband is a type 1 diabetic. And I kept calling him, and he wasn't answering. And on my phone, I actually have a program that I can read his numbers, and he was getting extremely low. So we had just moved into our house. We did not have keys to neighbors. We did not have a keypad for our garage. So a friend of ours that lives here in town called the Timnath police for me, and they had to break into our front door, but they were able to break into our front door and get the EMS in there and save my husband. So we're very grateful, very, very grateful.
And it was Phil Goldstein. That is a friend of the Grosses. So Phil, he's gone. He's gone.
Did he fall asleep?
No, there's nobody.
He
under the
amazingly
chair,
is
but
not here
anyway,
tonight.
Phil was friends of theirs, so he initiated the call for
Great.
service. So, and we're thankful he's in one piece.
Yes. Great.
Thank you.
You bet. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Gross, too. Resolution number 25, series 2023, a resolution approving the contract to buy and sell real estate land known as KM Farm North.
Thank you, Mayor.
Brian.
Give me 1 second to get the screen share up and then we're ready to go. All right. Thank you. I will keep this brief, but happily entertain any questions. I know we've been here for going on 3 hours now, so appreciate everybody's time commitment. So a brief overview of the KM North land sale. There's a pretty, the staff report in the packet, the contracts in there as well as the addendum. So I'm just going to kind of hit the high points real quick. The key points are the town originally purchased the property for about $1.3 million in December of 2018, and the offer price is $1.5 million. There are some contingencies for the buyer. They need to secure a contract with a power off taker. I think they're waiting for this contract to be executed before they start negotiating that. And then they need to secure some entitlements on the site through Timnath. That's going to entail a rezoning, a minor subdivision, and site plan approval at a minimum. Depending on how it shakes out, there could be some other things. There are some use restrictions on the property. So these would be the seller's requirements. So we want to see a minimum of 300 feet depth along Highway 14 reserved for commercial development. And then the remainder of the site can be used for solar power generation and storage. If after the execution of the contract that the solar power is not constructed within 3 years, we have the option to buy back the property for the purchase price. It's an option, not a requirement. So if we don't see that happening and we feel like we want to retake the property, we can. This is a contingency. I don't think that we would be executing it. But if we were to buy back the property, we would not be able to sell it to another entity for solar for 3 years. And the reason that's a safeguard for the buyer, they, I think, have some concerns that in other properties that they've worked on, there has been some kind of concern that the power provider will wait out the term of this lease and then purchase the property directly and cut them out of the project. So this kind of just gives them a little bit of protection. We do have a provision for first right of refusal on power generated on the property at the bulk wholesale rate. And that we can use that either on an adjacent property, KM South. If we were to develop a sports park there, we'd be able to get that power discounted, or we'd be able to do virtual net metering, which means we would take it off, pay a cost to transfer the power through somebody else's grid and then use it for a municipal purpose. And then we will allow them a easement through the property to the south so they can get from KM North to the substation. We did get a broker opinion of value. It is this document that I left on your table today. We did just get it on Monday, so I apologize for not getting included in the packet, but there was 2 key things I wanted to talk about: the strengths and weaknesses of the property. Well, first, the broker opinion of value was compiled by TJ Antonora and Pete Kelly for CBRE. They are you might remember, we have a contract with them to kind of represent the town and all of these real estate holdings and dealing. So they identified the strength as the Highway 14 frontage. I've done a lot of talking today. It's in the path of urban growth, and there's a large continuous tract of land. There are some weaknesses. The water rights have been stripped off the property, and there's not currently any adjacent water and sewer really in the neighborhood or capacity for that development. So they established the market value based on some comps that are listed in the packet, but they basically came between $8,000 and $10,000 an acre. That puts their estimate at between 1.2 and 1.5 million, and we're right at that top end of that estimate. That's pretty much the bulk of my presentation. Kind of went through that pretty quick, but I'm happy to answer any questions or get into more details if you guys have questions.
I'm going to start this time. So if ever there was a perfect use for this land, it's this solar park. And I'm pleased that we as a town are going ahead and taking a step forward, taking a proactive step to encourage a environmentally use of that property. And I think it's going to be well done. I think that it's a great move. We're getting one thing that you didn't mention that I'll mention to the council is we bought this property for 1.228 million. So we're selling it at a price that's higher than that. And we're also creating an ecological and green project for the town. So yeah, I couldn't be more pleased with the sale. I can't be more pleased with the fact that who's developing it, and I couldn't be, and I don't know him personally, and I couldn't be more pleased with what we're doing on this. So thank you, staff.
I'll just comment that for some reason, the phrase comes to mind, clean, green, and serene. I'm not sure where it's coming to mind, but it seems like a great deal. And it seems like this matches the terms that we've discussed. So I'm happy with it as well.
I just have a question. I saw in the contract, there's a dry up covenant. What is that?
That's correct. So when the town, the dry up covenant was in place when the town purchased the property, and what we bought the property from a group that had severed the native property right, the native water rights from that property already. So they severed the native water rights for that farm and used them somewhere else in the basin. So there's no native water rights acquired with it.
And another reason why this is the perfect use for it, because there's no water. Okay, anybody else?
I agree. I agree. Green energy. So.
All right.
I do have a question. Are they willing to put an EV charging station out there for?
I was actually going to ask about that, but I can't imagine too many cars being out there right now.
I think we can cover that at the site plan process.
All right. Do I have a motion to approve resolution number 25, series 2023, a resolution approving the contract to buy and sell real estate land, KM Farm North?
I move to approve the resolution approving the contract to buy and sell real estate for the KM North Farm.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Resolution number 26, series 2023, a resolution reappointing Phil Goldstein, Marty Jost, and Wendy Newland to the Planning Commission. Matt Blakely.
I'll take it real quick, Mayor.
Okay.
Those three planning commissioners, their terms are expiring here at the end of this month, March 31st. All three have indicated that they would like to continue their time on planning commission. So with that, we are, since they've been pretty good planning commissioners, served for a couple of years with us, pretty knowledgeable of the planning commission and the town right now. They are willing and wanting to continue for another 4 more years.
Okay.
I came from Planning Commission and had the pleasure of serving with Phil and Marty. Wendy came after I came to the council. But I just want to say that, these are all dedicated servants who at each meeting ask very thoughtful questions, are very considered about what they're doing. They don't always agree, which I appreciate, that, we're putting people through the paces. And specifically, Phil Goldstein has been an outstanding chairperson. He runs just an impeccable meeting. He's considerate to everyone that comes before the Planning Commission. And I just wanted to thank all three of them and appreciate their willingness to continue to serve the town for the next 4 years. Thank you, Phil and Marty and Wendy.
I agree with that. Although I'm wondering if we need to put in this resolution to preclude Phil from going near pickleball courts. I think it was wise too.
At least until the crutches are gone, maybe?
Yeah. All right, resolution number 26. Anybody have any comments? I'm sorry. Okay, resolution number 26, series 2023, a resolution reappointing Phil Goldstein, Marty Joyce, and Wendy Newland to the Planning Commission. Do I have a motion to approve?
I move to approve the resolution to reappoint Phil Goldstein, Marty Joyce, and Wendy Newland to the Planning Commission.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All those agree, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Resolution number 26, series 2023, a resolution reappointing Phil Goldstein, Marty Joyce, and Wendy Newland to the Planning Commission was approved unanimously. Does anybody have any other business to bring up? Okay. Thank you for lasting out. What is it? 7 hours. Good job. I didn't notice anybody with nitro drinks or anything here, so you guys are in good shape. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.